Chapter 679. King Yang Qiu's personal guards were divided into two types. One of them was the personal bodyguards who were responsible for his safety. These bodyguards were basically warriors whose brains were stuffed with muscles, or priests whose brains were replaced by the magic of ghosts and gods. They did not have any skills other than killing and arson, or acting as human shields when necessary. The second type was the various strange talents that King Yang Qiu had painstakingly gathered, such as those who specialized in managing his taxes and revenues, training his hounds and falcons, and training his personal guards, as well as people like Wu Qi, who could give him advice in government and military affairs. Bo Zhongfu eagerly escorted King Yang Qiu and his company to the gate with all the officials of the prefecture overseer's mansion. When King Yang Qiu boarded the chariot, Bo Zhongfu held Wu Qi's hand and said some warm words to him, trying to build a closer relationship with Wu Qi. He lowered his voice and told Wu Qi that as long as Wu Qi needed his help in East Sea County, just let him know. Wu Qi accepted Bo Zhongfu's kindness without hesitation. His identity was different now. As King Yang Qiu's personal guard, he was in fact King Yang Qiu's retainer. His subordinate was no longer in Zhong Province, but directly under King Yang Qiu. Although Bo Zhongfu was the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province and a close confidant of the current human emperor, King Yang Qiu was a member of the imperial clan, the King of Diyu. In terms of bloodline and tradition, Bo Zhongfu could not compare with King Yang Qiu at all. Now that he had become King Yang Qiu's personal guard, and a personal guard who specialized in military affairs, with King Yang Qiu's status, as long as Wu Qi made a little contribution in the future, it would be a piece of cake for him to be promoted. If Bo Zhongfu could build a good relationship with Wu Qi now, it would be extremely convenient for Bo Zhongfu and his clan in the future. It was just a few warm words, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. After sending King Yang Qiu to the chariot, Bo Zhongfu stood at the gate and watched as King Yang Qiu and his company stepped into the teleportation formation and disappeared in a beam of bright light. King Yang Qiu and his bodyguards returned to his barracks through the teleportation formation, but Wu Qi stayed in Zhongning City. He would lead his army to meet King Yang Qiu's army at dawn. Although King Yang Qiu came and went quickly, Wu Qi's identity medallion, military medallion, official documents, and even the uniforms of King Yang Qiu's personal guards were all distributed to him in the prefecture overseer's mansion. From these details, it could be seen that King Yang Qiu was full of confidence in his every move. He was confident that Wu Qi would not refuse his invitation, and he was confident that Bo Zhongfu would not give Wu Qi to him. Therefore, he had prepared everything in advance. Even the identity medallion that was given to Wu Qi was engraved with the name Tan Lang. All the official documents were properly prepared, and even the armor and cloak that were given to Wu Qi were a perfect fit. King Yang Qiu, who was extremely confident, tough and direct in his approach, lofty and even a little domineering, standing at the end of the street and watching King Yang Qiu's chariot disappear in the bright light, Wu Qi could not help but smile. Working for King Yang Qiu was obviously much better than staying in Zhong Province. If King Yang Qiu's personality was put to good use, it would be of great help to Wu Qi. With a faint smile, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Bo Zhongfu, who was standing at the entrance of the mansion. Then he hurried out of the city with his guards, preparing to assemble the army and arrange the logistics, and then meet King Yang Qiu at the place where he was stationed. King Yang Qiu was now leading an army to wipe out the strongholds of Myriad Immortal Alliance in Minggu Province, a first-grade province near Zhong Province. It would take him half a month to travel from Zhong Province to Minggu Province at the fastest speed of a flying ship. Therefore, Wu Qi had to arrange the march and deployment of the army along the way. After a busy night, the army of 10,000 soldiers from East Sea Province, who had just set up camp in the military camp in Zhongning City, was ready to set off. With Bo Yunting's favor, the military court of Zhong Province had replenished Wu Qi's army of 10,000 with enough armaments for 50,000 soldiers, and even made an exception for Wu Qi with several powerful war machines, such as giant crossbows. Even the current clan master of the Yu clan in Zhong Province, Yu Mu, had received the news and had sent hundreds of oracles to serve under Wu Qi. With the help of the hundreds of oracles, Wu Qi had no choice but to visit Yu Mu in person to express his gratitude. He knew that it was an investment from Yu Mu, but it was still a favor after all. The fact that Wu Qi could have hundreds of oracles accompanying his army of 10,000 soldiers was enough to make other military officers envious. When everything was ready, Wu Qi handed a map scroll to Huang Liang. The map scroll was also a small magical artifact, and it recorded the route from Zhong province to Minggu province to meet up with King Yangqiu's army. With it, Huang Liang could lead the army to Minggu province and join King Yangqiu's army. After all, Wu Qi's army did not have any military affairs to attend to at the moment, and it was just a normal deployment. The cost of using teleportation formations to get to Minggu province was too high, so it was better for them to travel by themselves. In particular, it was extremely costly to use teleportation formations to transport large flying ships and other things that came with the army. So, there was no need for Wu Qi's army of 10,000 soldiers to use too many resources. But Wu Qi was different. He was King Yangqiu's personal guard, and he had been given one night to organize the army. He had to rush to King Yangqiu's side as soon as possible and give him military affairs, which could not be delayed at all. Therefore, he had to use teleportation formations to get to King Yangqiu's side. After explaining everything and watching the flying ships led by Huang Liang take off in the direction of Minggu province, Wu Qi changed out of his armor and cloak, put on the unique uniform of King Yangqiu's personal guard, and hurried into Zhongning city with more than 100 personal guards, heading for the square in front of the prefecture overseer mansion. Because of the series of wars, Zhong province had entered a period of war preparation. The streets were empty, with few residents walking around, and more heavily armed patrols were patrolling the streets. The crisp sound of clappers could be heard coming from the watchtowers around the city. It was the signal for the sentries to change shifts and for the soldiers to have their breakfast. The wheels of a few convoys rattled as they made their way down the street. The vehicles were loaded with a large number of metal ingots and some glinting bones. These were the materials for the military court to forge ordnance and the raw materials for the Directorate of Celestials to craft bone talismans. The shops and restaurants along the streets were all open, but there were not many customers. Inside the empty houses, all the managers and waiters of the shops and restaurants were sitting on the long benches in a daze, staring blankly at Wu Qi and his company who were walking through the street at top speed like a pair of withered white geese. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. If the war between De Yu and Myriad Immortal Alliance continued, so what if the alliance was wiped out? De Yu's loss was not worth the gain, and the losses and blows they had suffered could not be made up for in 3 to 5 years. To get to the square in front of the Zhong province overseer mansion, they had to pass through Yu Clan's mansion. But today, coincidentally, when Wu Qi and his company passed through the front gate, Yu Miao's son, Yu Lei, the man who had gone to East Sea County to seize Wu Qi's property, happened to come out of the gate with a group of guards. Yu Lei was taken aback when he saw Wu Qi walk past in a majestic black armor with a ghost's head. Suddenly, he spat on the ground. Pointing a finger at Wu Qi, he sneered and said, "Look, this is the wild dog that can't be tamed properly." He only got the position of the county governor of East Sea County because he clung to Yu Miao's thigh, and now he has climbed to a higher position? Hee, Tan Lang, you are the dog of Yu Clan. Wu Qi flew into a rage and stopped abruptly. Yu Lei stood at the front gate, pointing a finger at Wu Qi and laughing sarcastically. Gradually, Yu Lei's words became more and more unpleasant, and he even described Wu Qi as Yu Miao's boy toy, saying that he had tricked Yu Miao into giving him the territory of East Sea County by sleeping with Yu Miao. In the end, Yu Lei burst out laughing without caring about the consequences and said, "This boy has fawned on King Yangqiu this time. I wonder how many times he has been fucked by someone, and how did he become King Yangqiu's personal guard?" Hee, a personal guard. The group of guards who followed Yu Lei threw their heads back and roared with laughter, and Yu Lei laughed loudly as well. His solemn, square-shaped face became extremely twisted and ferocious at this moment. Many of Wu Qi's personal guards took a few steps forward at the same time, trying to distinguish themselves from Yu Lei. The personal guards around Wu Qi were all carefully selected burly men who were born and raised in East Sea County. These simple and honest men did not know any great principles, but since Wu Qi had educated them with kindness and given money to their families, these stubborn men only knew one thing: Wu Qi was their master. If they did not react when their master was insulted like this, how could they still be human? But when Wu Qi scolded the guards, who were half unsheathed, they all took a few steps back reluctantly. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi walked up to Yu Lei, cupped his fist, and bowed gently to him. "Your Excellency Yu Lei, we don't have such a deep hatred, do we?" Yu Lei gave Wu Qi a sideways glance arrogantly, sneered, and said, "You know very well in your heart. Let's just wait and see. For someone like you who is like a pig or a dog, as long as my father is free, you will be turned into ashes sooner or later." Blood splashed in all directions, and the sound of bones breaking and flesh breaking shocked Yu Lei's personal guards. In front of so many servants and gatekeepers in front of Yu Clan's entrance, and so many personal guards, Wu Qi, who was still smiling a moment ago, suddenly rose and punched through Yu Lei's chest, digging out his violently beating heart. Wu Qi gave a strange laugh, tore open Yu Lei's jaw, shoved his heart into his mouth, and then smashed half of his head with his fist. A shrill ghost howl burst out from Wu Qi's palm, and a few wisps of dark smoke sprayed out, wrapping Yu Lei's soul tightly. Then, a wisp of green flame sprayed out. Yu Lei's soul let out a miserable howl, and in just a blink of an eye, it was burned into ashes. Murder on the street. Murder on the street in the center of Zhongning City. Murder on the street in front of the Yu clan, the ruler of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials. The victim was Yu Lei, the biological son of Yu Miao, the great elder of Yu clan. Silence reigned in the surroundings, as if even the wind between the heaven and earth had stopped moving. The only sound that could be heard was the blood dripping down from Wu Qi's fingertips, producing a soft dripping sound. A shrill howl soared into the sky from inside Yu clan's mansion, as Yu Miao, shrouded in a towering ghost aura, rushed out. "Tan Lang, you little punk, pay with your life." Yu Miao's body flickered as he leaped several miles into the air, thrusting his palm down toward Wu Qi. Chapter 680. Leaping up into the air, Yu Kei exerted almost all the strength he had in his previous life, throwing a palm strike at Wu Qi with all his might. Although he did not have the time to borrow the power of the ghost deity, with the energy he had accumulated over the years of associating with the ghost deity, the palm strike was as strong as an 18th-tier gold immortal. Accompanied by a shrill ghost howl, a black palm several tens of feet in circumference plunged down from the sky. Vaguely, one could see the shadows of runes flashing in the palm. It was the ghost warding seal, which Yuzong had obtained from the ghosts and deities of the outer domain after a cruel blood sacrifice. The palm strike could turn a living person into a ghost, and the ghost-controlling seal could immediately imprison the soul of the killer, turning him into a ghost servant under Yu Miao's control. Yu Miao stared at Wu Qi with eyes full of fire. He was determined to imprison Wu Qi's soul in the boundless Yin flame and torture him day and night, immersing him in endless pain for all eternity. For some reason, when Yu Miao saw Wu Qi for the first time, he felt uncomfortable all over and wished he could slap Wu Qi to death. In the end, Wu Qi had brought him great trouble. He could not believe that he had helped that good-for-nothing Yu Miao seize the power of High Province. In Yu Miao's mind, the power of High Province was supposed to be given to his beloved grandson, but in the end, it was Yu Miao. Not only that, during the fight for the power of High Province, Wu Qi had humiliated Yu Miao to such an extent. Yu Miao had failed to kill Wu Qi with 3 palm strikes in a row, which had become the joke of the whole Yu clan. After that, Yu Miao's disciple and son tried to retaliate against Wu Qi, but in the end, both of them were killed by Yu Huai's powerful counterattack. How could Yu Miao not feel heartache when he went for wool and came home shorn? Not only were his son and disciple killed, but the assassin he sent to assassinate Wu Qi, who was seriously wounded and bedridden, failed to kill him. Even when Wu Qi was brainwashed by the evil spirit Zither, the assassin failed to kill Wu Qi. Yu Lei, who was sent to take over the power of the East Sea County, returned to Zhongning City with a dejected face. Yu Lei had been humiliated, but the cruel revenge that followed had cost him a great number of his people. Dozens of his grandsons and granddaughters were killed, and the heartache almost made him faint. After that, the properties of many elders in his lineage were hit like a storm. Many shops were burned and looted, and the losses were so heavy that he almost went bankrupt. Even without the art of divination, Yu Miao knew that all this was related to Wu Qi, and he was definitely involved in it. Yu Miao thought that he was a successful man, and he had a good interpersonal relationship. Apart from Wu Qi, no one had such a grudge against him. Last night, when he heard that Wu Qi had been recruited by King Yang Qiu as his personal guard, and that Yu Miao had sent hundreds of oracles from the Directorate of Celestials to Wu Qi early in the morning, Yu Miao's resentment grew even stronger. After getting up early in the morning with a belly full of anger, Yu Miao was discussing with a few of his closest confidants how to retaliate against Wu Qi. Suddenly, his heart beat violently. His favorite son, Yu Lei, was killed right in front of Yu Clan's gate. As father and son were connected by blood, Yu Miao's blood and energy swelled at that moment, and the sudden heartache nearly made him faint. Looking at Wu Qi, whose hand was still stained with the blood of his beloved son, Yu Miao roared furiously and threw a palm strike at Wu Qi with all his strength. I don't care whose personal guard you are, whether you are a promising young man whom Yu Miao has tried his best to bribe, whether you have just sold a great favor to Bo Zhongfu, I'll kill you. I must kill you. Hovering in midair, Yu Miao let out a strange laugh. After the palm strike, he immediately performed an incantation gesture with both hands and muttered an incantation under his breath, preparing to use the power of the ghost god to burn Wu Qi to ashes. Looking at the vicious palm strike coming down from above, Wu Qi laughed and said, "You have a quick reaction. After all, father and son are cultivating their minds." Wu Qi knew very well how powerful the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials were, and he also knew their limitations. When they borrowed the power of the ghost god, they were qualified to fight against the primordial immortals of the celestial court. But when they did not borrow the power of the ghost god, their overall strength was nothing more than ordinary. When Yu Miao borrowed the power of the ghost god, his overall strength was close to that of a peak-level gold immortal. But now, the palm strike he threw out in a hurry was nothing more than the overall strength of an 18th-tier gold immortal. A mere 18th-tier gold immortal? Wu Qi's current cultivation base had crossed that threshold. Whether it was his fleshly body, magic power, or divine abilities, he was already half a step into the realm of gold immortals. And that was not all. After being tempered by 300 guardian heavenly dragons in Ming Li's Buddhist kingdom, Wu Qi's fleshly body was now strong enough to fight against a body cultivator of the realm of gold immortal. His current fleshly body was truly as strong as a gold immortal's. He threw his head back and let out a long roar. Purple mist rose from his body, and a great plume of ghostly gray mist sprayed out of it. Wu Qi sprung up into the sky, opened his mouth, and swallowed the palm strike. The interstitial world vibrated violently, and a large amount of chaotic energy soared into the sky, wrapping the grayish palm print in the boundless chaotic energy and gradually weakening it. This was the benefit of forming an interstitial world. Although Wu Qi could withstand the palm strike with his fleshly body, he was bound to be injured. But by absorbing and digesting the palm strike with his interstitial world, Wu Qi had a much easier time fighting against the power of one man with the power of a small world. Amidst Yu Miao's horrified gaze, he swallowed Yu Miao's attack in one gulp. Suddenly, dozens of figures who looked exactly like Wu Qi appeared amidst the ghostly energy around Wu Qi. Some of them were laughing loudly, some were wailing madly, some were rolling on the ground, and some were hacking and slashing at each other with sharp blades in their hands. With that, Wu Qi's true form had blended into the mass of ghostly shadows, and no one could capture his figure anymore. In the mansion, at least 50 moon oracles produced powerful bone talismans at the same time. All kinds of attacks, such as thunderbolts, flames, blades, ice, and wind, soared into the sky and pounced at Wu Qi. The shadows in the ghostly energy were shattered, but no matter how many they destroyed, 2 or more shadows would appear for every shadow they destroyed, and they could not be completely wiped out. Wu Qi gave a sinister laugh as he unleashed a vast sheet of Shen energy to envelop the entire mansion. Countless shadows emerged one after another, preventing the oracles from attacking him accurately. Meanwhile, his true form rushed in front of Yu Miao and punched him in the face. Wu Qi had used all his strength in the punch, and Yu Miao, who was caught off guard, howled miserably and was knocked flying away. However, Yu Miao had a few defensive spirit items with him. As soon as Wu Qi's punch shattered his nose, a spirit talisman leaped onto his head and transformed into a hazy robe that wrapped him up. 90% of the force of Wu Qi's punch was instantly absorbed by the robe, and Yu Miao was not fatally wounded. This was the gap between the defensive magical treasures of Oracle de Yu and the immortal items of immortals. Although the defensive magical treasures of Oracle de Yu were as powerful as immortal items, there was always a delay when they were activated, especially those bone talismans that could automatically protect their owners. Therefore, Oracle de Yu had to prepare all the magical treasures in advance before fighting the immortals. Otherwise, he would be in danger of losing his life if he was careless. Yu Miao had come out in a hurry, and his mind was filled with thoughts of revenge for his son. How could he have the time to activate his magical treasures? With great difficulty, a bone talisman that automatically protected Yu Miao's face, preventing him from being disfigured by Wu Qi. But Wu Qi's attacks came one after another. Punches, kicks, headbutt, elbows, and wisps of ghostly flames soared into the sky, transforming into ghostly claws that scratched and gnawed at Yu Miao. Amidst Wu Qi's deep and powerful incantation, all kinds of vicious curses and spells fell on Yu Miao like raindrops, putting him in a very difficult situation. For a moment, Yu Miao's eyes were bloodshot. Wu Qi's ghost eyes curse was trying to devour his eyes. For a moment, Yu Miao felt a sharp pain in his lower body. Wu Qi's yang breaking curse was corroding his yang. For a moment, Yu Miao's internal organs were numb and sore, and Wu Qi's internal rotting curse was corroding his internal organs. All kinds of vicious curses kept raining down. Fortunately, Yu Miao was, after all, an old oracle who had dabbled in all kinds of curses. Amidst Wu Qi's storm-like attacks, Yu Miao hastily blocked Wu Qi's punches and kicks. At the same time, he kept reciting incantations to ward off Wu Qi's curses. The few magical items he wore, such as jade pendants, jade bracelets, and jade rings, were glowing faintly, weakening Wu Qi's attacks. Seeing that Yu Miao was about to turn the tables with his experience, Wu Qi became anxious. "Come out, Lei Meng. I have something good for you," he cried out. A huge spatial rift that ordinary people could not perceive suddenly appeared over the Yu clan's mansion, and Lei Meng's projection descended at the fastest speed. Lei Meng's lips were moving rapidly, as if he was chewing something. At the same time, he kept burping. Obviously, he had not finished digesting the blood sacrifice on Myriad Immortals' planet. What is it? There is something good again? You are a quick and efficient boy, and I like it. Lei Meng burst into laughter as soon as he appeared. For a moment, Yu Miao's face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and he looked no different from a ghost. Looking at Lei Meng looming in the sky in horror, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Gui Shao! Save me, Your Excellency Gui Shao! I'll definitely prepare a large amount of blood sacrifice for you." While Yu Miao was reciting incantations and howling, Wu Qi had already finished the exchange with Lei Meng as fast as he could, then pointed a finger at Yu Miao. Lei Meng sneered and slapped his palm down. Bolts of lightning coiled around the palm like countless furious dragons twisting and roaring. Seeing that Lei Meng was about to kill Yu Miao, who was screaming and screaming, finally persuaded Gui Shao, the ancestor god he worshipped, to save him by offering a large amount of blood sacrifice. A bony arm with ragged skin and flesh stretched out of the void next to Yu Miao and collided with Lei Meng's hand with brute force. A deafening boom rang out, and dozens of palaces in Yu clan's mansion collapsed. Lei Meng gave a furious roar as he grabbed the giant hand and followed it into the spatial tunnel. Obviously, he had failed to kill Yu Miao, so he had gone straight to Gui Shao to kill him. Yu Miao, on the other hand, howled miserably. Although the two ghosts and deities did not kill him, all the magical items he carried, such as jade pendants, were shattered, and the huge shockwaves severely wounded his frail body. A beam of black light shot out of Wu Qi's collar. Ao Buzan opened his mouth and bit down on Yu Miao's body, ripping off both of his legs with a loud crunch. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. Just as he was about to rush forward and kill Yu Miao, a beam of dark light suddenly approached him from the side. Yu Miao stopped in front of Wu Qi, looking at Wu Qi with a faint smile on his face as he nodded and said, "General Tan Lang, for my sake, please spare the Grand Elder of Yu Clan." Wu Qi was taken aback, and his clenched fist could no longer punch down. Chapter 681. Yu Miao fell heavily to the ground. Both of his legs were bitten off by Audiobook, but there was not even a drop of blood on the wound. Only a sticky, pale green liquid was slowly oozing out. This was the result of years of dealing with ghosts, deities, and other otherworldly beings. Yu Miao did not have much blood essence left in his body, and he relied entirely on this blood-like liquid, which was a mixture of ghost energy, magic power, and the aura of living beings to sustain his life. Had it not been for all kinds of rare spirit herbs, he would have exhausted his lifespan and returned to transmigration when the first wisp of this liquid, which was called ghost blood, appeared in his body. But, as the great elder of the Yu clan in Zhong province, he had access to a lot of resources, and he could constantly consume all kinds of rare natural treasures to prolong his lifespan. That was why he was able to live to this day. Hiding in Wu Qi's collar, Audiobook munched contentedly on both of Yu Miao's legs. As he had been taking a lot of spirit herbs to sustain his life, his body had accumulated a lot of undigested medicinal strength. After all, he was not an immortal, and there was still a lot of medicinal strength left in his body after the spirit herbs had prolonged his lifespan. The 2 legs Audiobook had bitten off contained an amazing medicinal strength. If digested, it would undoubtedly be equivalent to the medicinal strength of several gold immortal pills concocted by gold immortals, which would be of great benefit to Audiobook. In front of all the members of the Yu clan, Wu Qi stomped heavily on the seriously wounded Yu Miao's face. Wu Qi was clad in the ghost head heavy armor specially equipped by King Yang Qiu's personal guards, and his boots were a set of metal boots that were fused with the greaves. The heavy soles were forged with countless layers of flexible metal sheets, and the 1-inch thick metal soles had been refined with a mystic technique, making them as soft as the soles of ox tendons. But their defensive strength was not to be underestimated. The soles of the heavy metal boots were densely covered with sharp teeth that looked like wolf fangs. When Wu Qi stomped on Yu Miao's face, the teeth sank deep into his cheek. Drops of ghost blood kept oozing out of his face, but he did not even make a sound. With a strange sneer on his face, Yu Mu fixed his eyes on Yu Miao, who was standing next to him, gasping for breath with his mouth open. Yu Mu glanced at Wu Qi with a strange smile that he could not explain, then cupped his fist and bowed solemnly to Wu Qi. "General Tan Lang, it's my fault this time. Yu Lei's words just now were very disrespectful to King Yang Qiu. General Tan Lang, please cover it up for us." When Yu Lei insulted and attacked Wu Qi just now, he had implicated King Yang Qiu. It could be a big or a small matter, and it was easy to turn it into a small one. As long as no one told King Yang Qiu about it, the world would be at peace, and no one would take it seriously. But, if someone told King Yang Qiu about it, and someone like Wu Qi added fuel to the story, King Yang Qiu would have to chop off thousands of heads to appease his anger for such a disrespectful act to the king of the imperial clan. By pointing out that it was Yu Lei's fault, and intentionally or unintentionally pointed out that it was disrespectful to King Yang Qiu, Yu Mu had shut the mouths of many elders and members of Yu clan so that they could no longer defend Yu Lei. Wu Qi bowed respectfully to Yu Mu and said with a smile, "Why do you say that, Your Excellency Yu Mu? What does the words and deeds of Yu clan have to do with the words and deeds of a lunatic like Yu Lei? The culprit has been killed by me on the spot. Let's just forget about it, shall we?" Yu Mu was very satisfied with Wu Qi's attitude. Although Wu Qi had established a relationship with King Yang Qiu, he was still so respectful to him, which made him feel very comfortable. He gave Wu Qi an appreciative look, then nodded with a smile, indicating that he would let go of the matter of Yu Lei's disrespect to King Yang Qiu. They exchanged a glance tacitly, and then Wu Qi tightened his face and stamped hard on Yu Mu's head, making the severely wounded Yu Mu's skull creak. Fortunately, Yu Mu had been in contact with ghosts and deities for many years, and as a result, his muscles and bones had been nourished by the aura of ghosts and deities and improved to a certain extent. As a result, his fleshly body was comparable to an ordinary mid-tier heaven immortal who had tempered his body. Therefore, although Wu Qi's foot was strong, it did not break his head. But it was, after all, a great humiliation to be stepped on by someone, especially for someone like Yu Mu. It was a stain that could never be washed away for the rest of his life. Yu Mu rolled his eyes and fixed them on Wu Qi. His eyes were cold and gloomy, and there was no change of emotion in them. But Wu Qi knew that Yu Mu's hatred for him had reached its peak, and it was now a battle of life and death. But they were in Zhongning City, right in front of Yu Clan's mansion. How could he kill Yu Mu here? If Wu Qi were a noble of Yu, and if he had a title of nobility, given what had happened today, Yu Lei's provocation, and then Yu Mu's retaliation, it would be justifiable for him to kill Yu Mu and Yu Lei. At most, he would be punished with a demotion of his title of nobility. But, although Wu Qi had a military rank now, he was just a commoner, and he had no right to kill Yu Mu. He could kill Yu Lei because he deserved to die for insulting King Yangqiu. But, even if Wu Qi had the ability to kill a man like Yu Mu, he could not do it in public. Otherwise, Wu Qi would be provoking all the powerful clans in the system of Diyu's Directorate of Celestials, as well as all the nobles of Diyu. If that happened, even King Yangqiu would not be able to protect Wu Qi. Therefore, Wu Qi could not kill Yu Mu, and he could only assassinate him from behind, not let Wu Qi kill him in public. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi rubbed Yu Miao's face with his boot, grinding the flesh to a pulp. "The matter of Yu Lei is over," he said solemnly, "but I can't believe Your Excellency Yu Miao attacked me. Heh, does the left minister of Zhong Province, Yu Mu, have no respect for me?" Yu Mu smiled faintly, then nodded and said, "Yu Mu was indeed rude. General Tan Lang is now King Yangqiu's personal guard, and a great talent whom King Yangqiu has personally recruited to assist in military affairs. Yu Mu brazenly attacked and killed General Tan Lang, and Yu Mu is to blame for it. General Tan Lang has seriously wounded Yu Mu with a counterattack, and we, the Yu clan, have no objection." On behalf of the entire Yu clan, Yu Mu had made the decision. As the current clan leader of the Yu clan in Zhong Province, his words were tantamount to Yu Mu being beaten up for nothing and his legs being bitten off by Ao Buzan for nothing. With Yu Mu's guarantee, the people of the Yu clan could never openly retaliate against Wu Qi. As for Yu Mu sending someone to assassinate him from behind, wasn't Yu Mu and Wu Qi sending someone to assassinate each other? It was inevitable, so there was no need to mention it. Wu Qi smiled grimly and gave Yu Mu's head another hard kick. "You can escape death, but you can't escape punishment." Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "His Excellency Yu Mu suddenly tried to kill me, and I can bear it. After all, even if that unfilial son of his is a troublemaker, it is inevitable that he will do something irrational out of anger. But, Elder Yu Mu, aren't you being disrespectful to King Yangqiu by acting so recklessly?" More and more people of the Yu clan were gathering around, and some of their private armies had sealed off the streets. All the nearby mansions were the residences of the important ministers of Zhong Province, and all of them had their doors tightly shut. But countless people were looking at them from the top of the walls and tall buildings, pointing and whispering among themselves. Yu Mu glanced at the onlookers, then rubbed his palms together. A plume of gray smoke rose from the ground and enveloped the entire street. After ordering the other members of the Yu clan to retreat hundreds of feet, he came to Wu Qi's side and cast a soundproof barrier to shroud himself, Wu Qi, and Yu Mu. Looking at Yu Mu, who was being kicked to the ground by Wu Qi, Yu Mu suddenly smiled happily and said, "You're in the right here, so you can ask for anything." "Well, as long as it doesn't hurt the foundation of the Yu clan, as the current clan leader of the Yu clan, I can agree to any request." They looked at each other and smiled tacitly, then Wu Qi said in a deep voice with a straight face, "It's easy to solve this problem. His Excellency Yu Mu has committed such atrocities, and he has lost his dignity and dignity. Why don't we ask him to step down from the post of left minister of the Directorate of Celestials?" Yu Mu agreed to Wu Qi's first condition. Taking advantage of Yu Mu's broken legs and the fact that he had committed such atrocities to kick Yu Mu out of the Directorate of Celestials was something he had failed to achieve after years of hard work. So, why not? Once Yu Mu stepped down, he could immediately promote his closest confidant to take over the post of Left Minister of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong Province. With that, the entire power of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong Province would fall into his hands. Yu Mu trembled with anger. He gritted his teeth and growled. But how could he have the strength to resist when Lei Meng and Gui Xiao collided head-on with him just now, and the aftermath had seriously wounded him? Wu Qi's brute force was so strong that he could not move even a little bit when he stamped his foot on Yu Mu's head. Yu Mu insulted His Excellency in the street, and His Excellency is magnanimous enough to let it go. But what about the fee for covering up his shame? Wu Qi rubbed his fingers. This was the first time the term fee for covering up his shame had appeared on Pangu continent. There was no doubt that Wu Qi had made a great contribution to the construction of spiritual civilization in the Yu dynasty. Fee for covering up his shame? Yu Mu and Yu Mu were stunned at the same time. And the compensation for mental damage. Wu Qi had once again added bricks and tiles to the construction of spiritual civilization in the Yu dynasty. Yu Mu was a smart man, but if he was not, he could not have become the Grand Oracle of the Directorate of Celestials and the current clan leader of the Yu clan in Zhong Province. Yu Mu gave Wu Qi a thoughtful look and said in a deep voice, "Yu Mu has insulted His Excellency, and His Excellency's reputation has been tarnished. Yu Lei has been killed by you in the street. But as for His Excellency's reputation, we can only make up for it with some gold, silver, and jewelry." Wu Qi looked at Yu Mu, and Yu Mu looked at Wu Qi. After looking at each other for a while, they looked down at Yu Mu at the same time. "His Excellency Yu Mu should be very rich," Wu Qi said in a deep voice. Yu Mu nodded and smiled. "His Excellency Yu Mu should be very rich." Yu Mu nodded with a smile and said, "That's true. Whose son caused the trouble, he should bear all the responsibility himself." After dispelling the soundproof restrictive spell and dispersing the thick gray fog, Yu Mu summoned all the elders of Yu clan at the entrance of his house and told them about Wu Qi's request. He cautiously warned the elders that if they did not meet Wu Qi's request, Wu Qi would definitely complain to King Yang Qiu, and at that time, Yu Mu was likely to be severely punished by King Yang Qiu. A quarter of an hour later, the elders of Yu Mu's branch emptied more than half of their storehouse and fulfilled Wu Qi's blackmail request. With a big smile on his face, Yu Mu took Wu Qi's hand and personally sent him into the teleportation formation. Wu Qi walked into the formation with a pair of sleeves and bowed to Yu Mu, then took his leave with a smile on his face. He had killed his son, wounded his father, and seized his property. Wu Qi suddenly breathed a deep sigh. Chapter 682. In Diyu Province, Mingu Province was a first-grade province with the same status as Zhong Province. It was also the largest province with the strangest topography near Zhong Province. Apart from a few plains and mountains, more than 95% of the land in this vast province was filled with sunken valleys. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, countless low-lying valleys that looked like the sulci of the human brain could be found everywhere in Mingu State. The largest of them, Min Valley, occupied 30% of the land in Mingu Province. It covered a huge area, and its deepest known depth was 700,000 miles below sea level. Even the supreme oracles of Diyu were not interested in exploring the deeper and more dangerous valleys. Legend had it that Min Valley was formed from the navel of the great Saint Pangu, who had incarnated Pangu continent. There was no such thing as the deepest valley in Min Valley. As long as you looked for it, you would find a valley that was deeper than the previous one. The capital city of Mingu Province, Green Valley City, was located at the edge of Min Valley, in a huge valley less than 100 miles deep. Green Valley City was a vast expanse of fertile and mature farmland, with abundant sunshine and dense water vapor, which made it extremely rich in natural resources. Mingu Province was not only rich in all kinds of spirit herbs that like the shade, but also the largest producer of all kinds of spirit items on Pangu continent, such as chalcedony and milk of spirit stone. Naturally, The union of 10,000 immortals had many strongholds here. There were too many deep valleys, too many hiding places, and an abundance of all kinds of natural treasures that were helpful to immortal cultivators. Even the output of demon beasts and demon spirits was 100 times that of other provinces in Diu. Therefore, many immortals and itinerant cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance were scrambling to open up cave abodes in Mingu Province. As for the other itinerant cultivator clans that did not belong to Myriad Immortal Alliance, no one knew how many of them had settled down here. When Wu Qi walked out of the teleportation formation in the center of Green Valley City, a few black-robed heralds were already waiting for him. After verifying Wu Qi's identity medallion, seal, and other items, a few military officers brought Wu Qi into a coach that was pulled by a three-headed blue lion. The oracle who controlled the chariot gave a soft cry. A thin layer of cloud rose from under the chariot, lifting the chariot and the guards brought by Wu Qi hundreds of feet into the air as they sped out of the city. Only on the chariot did Wu Qi have a chance to take a closer look at Green Valley City. The layout and even the shape of the other cities in Great Yu were exactly the same. The prefecture overseer mansion was right in the center of the city, the military court and the directorate of celestials were on the left and right, and the punishment court was in a corner of the city, next to a dungeon built underground. Basically, anyone who had been to any first-grade province of Diu would not get lost in Green Valley City, because all the halls and toilets were in the same position, and even the size of the toilets remained the same. The only difference between Green Valley City and Zhongning City was that, because of the different geological structure, the rocks around Green Valley City had a slight tinge of green, which made the whole city look greener and livelier than Zhongning City, which was covered with dark clouds. After flying for hundreds of miles, Wu Qi came to a flat grassland and saw a cloud platform hovering 1,000 feet above the ground. On top of it were large tents, ceremonial gates, barracks, and soldiers performing drills. Compared to Bo Yunting's cloud platform, this one was several times larger, and in the middle of it was a small hall with 3 entrances. This was King Yang Qiu's field headquarters. Below the cloud platform was a neatly arranged barracks. At a glance, Wu Qi could see more than 20,000 black tents. According to the system of Diu army, each tent was occupied by 10 soldiers, which meant that there were at least 200,000 soldiers here. High up in the clouds, hundreds of huge flying boats were cruising and patrolling in the air. Occasionally, oracles from the Directorate of Celestials would fly past on clouds, and from time to time, ghostly figures could be seen flickering in the dark clouds. What surprised Wu Qi even more was that, from time to time, there would be a few faint beams of light that shone down from the sky, covering an area of 100 miles in circumference. When he was shrouded by these beams of light, he felt his body tighten, and vaguely, tiny electric arcs burst out from his body. It was a divine ability similar to the void glimpsing grand magic of immortal magic. Wherever the beams of light passed, there would be magical treasures that could break the invisibility spells of immortal magic, and it was a very good way to prevent enemy scouts from sneaking into the camp to spy on the army. If someone were to use a divine ability to spy on the camp, the beams of light could also give an early warning, allowing the oracles to react at any time. It was a very good divine ability, but no one in the army under Bo Yunting's command knew how to use it. Perhaps it was a restrictive spell that was only activated by some powerful magical artifact. But whatever the case, it proved that King Yang Qiu's army was much better treated than the army of Zhong Province. Wu Qi looked up at the sky. There were only 3 flying ships in the entire Zhong Province, and he saw 12 of them. In terms of wealth, the armaments for King Yang Qiu's army of 200,000 soldiers were equivalent to the total of all the armies in 4 Zhong Province. Led by a few military officers, Wu Qi stepped onto the cloud platform of King Yang Qiu's field headquarters. His guards were led to a nearby camp to rest, and after a strict identification, Wu Qi finally entered the Great Hall in the center of the cloud platform and saw King Yang Qiu, who was discussing the battle plan with his aides. Whether it was Diyu's Great Hall or his tent, they both liked to compress the void with a divine ability similar to the interstitial space. From the outside, King Yang Qiu's Great Hall was no more than hundreds of feet in length and width, and only tens of feet in height. But as soon as he entered, Wu Qi found that it was more than 10 miles long, about 7 miles deep, and about a mile high. There were no pillars in the Great Hall, and the empty space gave people a great psychological pressure. On both sides of the Great Hall, several hundred longbow men clad in rock armors were seen standing with their backs pressed against the walls. Their eyes flickered with a golden gleam as they blinked, and the powerful aura emanating from them made Wu Qi feel a tightness in his chest. These longbow men were very powerful warriors, and Wu Qi even suspected that their cultivation bases had broken through the realm of gold immortals. The ostentation of a king of Great Yu was indeed different from that of a local official. There were no more than 100 generals under Bo Yunting who were strong enough to fight against gold immortals, but the hundreds of longbow men whom King Yangqiu used as guards of honor were all as strong as gold immortals. The ceiling of the Great Hall was inlaid with countless pearls and gems, and the clear light from them made a map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins on the floor stand out. The three-dimensional map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins was changing violently. From time to time, mountains and rivers could be seen flickering in it, but most of them were deep valleys that made one's scalp go numb. King Yangqiu's lower body was covered with a black skirt-like armor and a lion belt around his waist, leaving his upper body bare except for a bronze breastplate and half a pauldron. When the disheveled King Yangqiu saw Wu Qi come in, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly as if he was smiling. He beckoned at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, "Tan Lang, come here and have a look at the terrain here." With a casual point of his finger, the map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins on the floor flickered and revealed a valley about 10,000 miles long and 100 miles wide, shaped like an eye, with a deep pool of water in the center of the eye. The valley was filled with stone peaks that stood about 10,000 feet tall, very thin, and very straight. Only the pool of water was hundreds of miles in circumference, which was a beautiful scenery. Near a hill next to the pool, there were many palaces and pavilions made of gold bricks and jade tiles, all of which were shrouded in a faint purple mist. When a breeze blew past, an immortal aura rose into the air. Wu Qi cupped his fist and answered, then strode up to the map and fixed his eyes on the valley, which was actually more than 10,000 miles long, but only a few miles long in the map. Presumably, this map was made by De Yu's military court and was specially used for marching and fighting. As long as Wu Qi cast his eyes on a mountain, information about it would be fed back to him in the form of divine sense. After giving the valley a careful look, Wu Qi nodded thoughtfully. It was a formation constructed with the help of the natural terrain, and the person who constructed it must be of a very high level. There were a total of 36,000 stone peaks in the valley, and all of them had become the eye of the formation. The formation corresponded to the stars, and there should be an extremely powerful immortal artifact in it as its foundation. That was why it was so powerful. Anyone who was not a true master of formations would find it difficult to recognize the principle of the formation, let alone break it. After pretending to ponder for a while, Wu Qi said slowly, "This seems to be a formation constructed by an immortal." King Yangqiu raised his eyebrows and looked at Wu Qi happily. Just as he was about to say something, a faint laugh suddenly came from the side. "Since you've found out that this is a formation constructed by an immortal, do you have a way to break it, General? If you can really break the formation as the legend says, His Excellency will definitely reward you handsomely. But, can you really understand the secret of this formation?" The laughter was full of sarcasm, and the words were aggressive toward Wu Qi. In short, the speaker was full of malice toward Wu Qi. Surprised, Wu Qi raised his head and looked towards the direction of the voice. He saw a middle-aged man sitting on a four-wheeled wooden chair. He was clad in a clean white long robe, with a black silk belt tied around his waist. He was holding a goose feather fan in his hand, and his hair was disheveled. He looked like a transcendent being. The man was handsome and elegant, but the way he looked at Wu Qi was full of disdain, sarcasm, jealousy, and malice. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi cupped his fist to the man and asked, "May I know your name, mister?" The man waved his fan slightly, but he didn't say anything in a reserved manner. King Yangqiu glanced at the man and said lightly, "General Tan Lang, this old mister is Yu Qingqing, the master of Yu Academy founded by my father. Yu Academy? What a familiar name. Yu Qingqing? Wu Qi burst out laughing. Wasn't Yu Qingqing the clan master of the Yu clan and the founder of Yu Academy when the Yu clan of Great Yan suddenly prospered? This old fellow is not dead yet? Wu Qi laughed at himself. He could not believe that he and the Yu clan were fated to meet someone like Yu Qingqing here. No matter why Yu Qingqing was provoking Wu Qi just smiled and said, "So, old mister, you can break this formation?" As soon as Wu Qi said that, Yu Qingqing's face turned purple-red. Chapter 683. Yu Miao's summer villa was located on Mount Hanyu outside Zhongning City. A few palaces built of pitch-black boulders lay between the mountain streams like monsters, connected by small paths. Wild ducks could be seen swimming in the gurgling stream, giving the place an elegant charm that was rarely seen in Diyu. Amidst the trees and rocks, guards clad in tight black leather armors were crouching in dark corners like venomous snakes, glancing around vigilantly with gloomy and deep eyes. From time to time, a thin layer of gray mist would gush out from between the rocks, and vague figures could be seen twisting and flashing in the mist. With the power of the mist, these Yin ghosts were fearless of the scorching sun, and could show themselves in broad daylight, walking leisurely between the mountains. If an outsider invaded the woods, these Yin ghosts would either let out a warning howl, or pounce on the intruder and suck his blood essence dry. In the grass beside the paths, a large number of venomous snakes and insects were wriggling. These venomous snakes and insects were the ferocious species carefully selected by the Yu clan in Zhong province and fed with curses and poisons, which made them extremely vicious and vicious. Even an immortal would be in danger of dying if bitten by these venomous snakes and insects. Among them, the few kings of snakes and insects were demons that the Yu clan had been raising for countless years, and their venom could even kill a gold immortal. There was a cliff in the mountains, and a stream of white water was shooting out from a hole on the cliff that was tens of feet in diameter. The water was about 10 feet thick, and it was flowing rapidly like a flood dragon, producing a deep, muffled roar that sounded like thunder. Dozens of burly men clad in heavy armors and emanating a lifeless aura stood on both sides of the stream, their grayish-white eyes looking around blankly like dead fish. Meanwhile, a few oracles with the pattern of 9 moons embroidered on their sleeves were sitting on the rocks by the water with their legs crossed, chatting with each other. After entering the hole and walking along the stream of white water for a few miles, the water would sink into the ground, and there would be a hole emitting a cold air right next to it. After entering the hole and walking down for tens of miles, they would come to a cave abode made of cold jade. The cave abode, about a mile in circumference, was made entirely of a piece of 10,000-year-old cold jade, emanating a cold air that could freeze metal weapons and armors to pieces. The white jade was almost translucent, and dazzling gleams shot out of it like blades and swords, making it impossible for ordinary people to look at it directly. In the middle of the cave abode was a blue xianbing bed. Yu Miao, whose legs were bitten off by Ao Buzan, was lying naked on the bed, gritting his teeth as he underwent surgery from an elder of his clan. The xianbing bed was excavated by the ancestors of Yu clan from a dangerous place in some outer heavenly realm. The temperature of the xianbing was extremely low, and any ordinary immortal item would be frozen and cracked if it were touched by the cold air emanating from the xianbing. If not for Yu Miao's cultivation base, which was comparable to a gold immortal, and the fact that he had taken a lot of rare herbs to protect his heart meridians and body, he would have been frozen into a zombie by now. A dozen elders of the Yu clan in Zhong province sat around Yu Miao, their eyes fixed on the elder, who was the oldest and most senior in Yu clan, and had not shown himself for many years, performing the operation on Yu Miao. The elder stood about 10 feet tall, and his body was withered and shriveled like a mummy. Only his hands were crystal clear, snow-white, and delicate, as if they were carved from jade. No hands of a peerless beauty could compare to the breathtaking beauty of his opponent. It was as if all his spirit, energy, and soul had been gathered in his palms, and when he moved his fingers, wisps of jade light would accompany them. Holding a jade dagger, a jade needle, and a roll of unknown transparent thread, the elder quickly sewed up Yu Miao's nerves, blood vessels and meridians, connecting the two plump thighs to him. In a corner of the cave abode, a handsome young man was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open. There was a crack between his brows, and it was the wound that went straight into his head that killed him. His legs had been taken away by someone, and were now being attached to Yu Miao's body. The blood that flowed out of the young man's cracked skull was golden in color, mixed with a hint of purple energy. It was the purple energy of immortal blood that only a gold immortal could have. He was at least an 18th tier gold immortal. But now, he was lying on the ground, dead like any other mortal. A crisp cracking sound rang out as the elder's jade knife cut through a transparent thread. After completing all the operations, he grabbed a fist-sized medicine jar from a jade table next to Xian Bing's bed, carefully dug out some pale green ointment with his fingers, and applied it to the stitches on Yu Miao's limbs. Wherever the ointment touched, the stitches healed quickly. Yu Miao let out a deep cry of pain as the ghost blood in his body gradually flowed into the new blood vessels in his thighs, gradually transforming the remaining gold immortal blood in them. The two different types of blood devoured and fused with each other, and the excruciating pain made him feel as if someone was grinding his legs inch by inch with a millstone. The indescribable pain made Yu Mu's face twist. Gritting his teeth, he straightened his upper body and bowed respectfully to the secluded elder. "Great-grandfather, thank you for your help this time. We are really useless. How could we let a lowly man bully us?" he said. Casually, the elder put away the jade knife, jade needle, and thread into his sleeve. "It doesn't matter," he said coolly. "There are bound to be a few times in one's life when one is deceived and taken advantage of. You only had your legs broken. Back then, hee." Laughing strangely, the elder shook his head, turned, and walked into the depths of the cave abode, ignoring Yu Miao and the other elders of Yu clan in Zhong province. Yu Miao exchanged a glance with the elders around him. He knew what the elder was going to say. Years ago, when the Yu clan in Zhong province underwent a great upheaval, the Yu clan in Liangzhu had reached out to take control of the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province, and had sent Yu Miao to Zhong province to seize the position of clan leader. The elder fought with Yu Miao, and as a result, he was severely wounded by the man sent by the Yu clan in Liangzhu, with all his internal organs crushed into meat paste. Fortunately, the ghost god worshipped by the elder had the power to bring the dead back to life. Yu Miao and the others had secretly held a blood sacrifice, and the ghost god had saved the elder's life. Even so, the elder had to lie in bed for decades before he could move again, and over the years, he had been cultivating in seclusion in Mount Hanyu, never going out to meet anyone. The crowd exchanged glances, and Yu Miao cried out in a low voice, "Yu Lei is dead, and I've lost another son." The faces of the elders of Yu clan were 3 inches longer than a donkey's, and there was a hint of complaint in their eyes as they looked at Yu Miao. "You, Yu Miao, have only lost one son. In any case, you have many sons, and countless grandchildren. You just need to have a few more sons." But, in order to give Wu Qi the so-called cover-up fee, under the joint pressure of Yu Miao and Wu Qi, all the elders present had taken out a lot of gold and silver, and lost countless natural treasures. A son was nothing more than a concubine, something that could be obtained with a shiver. But the gold and silver, as well as the natural treasures, were accumulated by these elders bit by bit. It only took them a moment to make a son, but it took them thousands of years of hard work to accumulate so much wealth. But, in the end, because Yu Miao's son insulted King Yang Qiu, they had to give away all their wealth. Despite the resentment in their hearts, none of the elders said a word. It was a personal grudge between Yu Miao and Wu Qi, but it had harmed the interests of these elders, and they would not support Yu Miao unconditionally. If it were not for the fact that they needed Yu Miao to take the lead in competing with Yu Miao for the power of the clan, they would not care about Yu Miao's life and death. But now, Yu Miao had seized on Yu Miao's mistake and was determined to strip him of his position as the left minister of the Directorate of Celestials. Whether these elders would still support Yu Miao would depend on the situation. Yu Miao instantly understood what these elders were thinking, and it was undoubtedly a great threat to him. Without the support of these elders of Yu clan in Zhong province, with Yu Miao's overall strength, it was very likely that he would be tortured by Yu Miao within 3 to 5 years. Yu Miao cleared his throat and said in a deep voice, "I'll make up for your loss with the properties under my name." After calculating the properties under Yu Miao's name, the few elders shook their heads at the same time. Yu Miao's current net worth was not enough to make up for the loss of a dozen elders present. Yu Miao understood what these elders were thinking. He reached out his hand and grabbed a scroll out of thin air, then threw it to the nearest elder. "These are the mineral veins I've secretly developed over the past 300 years, as well as the immortal markets I've opened in other provinces. There should be enough for you to divide among yourselves." The elders of Yu clan leaned over and carefully read the many properties recorded on the scroll. Then they could not help but gasp at the same time. As the elders of Yu clan, they had violated the Yu's ban by secretly mining some immortal stones and energy stone veins, and secretly selling some rare metals and spirit herbs. They had more or less colluded with those immortals. But this was the first time they had seen someone like Yu Miao, who had mined hundreds of immortal stones and energy stone veins and opened more than 200 immortal markets of different sizes. But it was true that if these properties were distributed equally, it would be more than enough to make up for the loss of the elders. The elders looked at Yu Miao calmly, their faces once again wearing a slightly respectful smile that Yu Miao was familiar with. Yu Miao nodded with satisfaction and said in a deep voice, "I won't rest until Tan Lang is dead. But he is now King Yang Qiu's personal guard. If we assassinate him again, I'm afraid that His Highness—" He paused for a moment, then frowned and continued, "Besides, with my cultivation base, I can't divine his exact whereabouts. Yu Miao must have done something to him." The elders turned to look at Yu Miao at the same time, wondering how he was going to solve the problem. Wu Qi had King Yang Qiu's support, and if they killed Wu Qi, they would probably offend King Yang Qiu. But if they continued to kill Wu Qi, they would probably have to face Yu Miao directly. With Yu Miao's cultivation base, he could kill so many elders without leaving any traces behind. Yu Miao gave a wry smile and sighed. "This is a personal grudge between me and that guy. Let me deal with it alone." Gritting his teeth, he said in a deep voice, "To tell you the truth, I'm going to hire immortals to assassinate him at a high price." The elders were startled, and then they burst into laughter at the same time. Obviously, hiring immortals to assassinate Wu Qi at a high price was the best way to do it. They exchanged a glance and nodded at the same time. Now that the war was in chaos, the death of Wu Qi was not a big deal. One of the elders hesitated for a moment, then suddenly asked in a low voice, "In that case, why don't we pay a high price and get Yu Miao?" The corner of Yu Miao's mouth curved into a smile. Chapter 684. It was a nameless mountain range at the border of Mingu Province and a 6th-grade province under the jurisdiction of Zhong Province. Hundreds of years ago, the Directorate of Celestials of Zhong Province had designated this nameless mountain range as a testing ground for some new oracles who had just joined the Directorate of Celestials. Here, they would conduct some strange magic spells and sacrificial rituals, and even let the new oracles fight with powerful demon beasts. Therefore, it had been a very long time since anyone had entered this nameless mountain range. If one were to walk in this mountain range, one might be possessed by a ghost who had missed an experiment and have his blood essence and soul taken away. If one accidentally heard someone calling one's name and answered casually, one might have his soul sucked away. If one drank a mouthful of water from a stream, perhaps some oracles who specialized in poisons from the Directorate of Celestials had poisoned it before, and a mouthful of water could kill tens of thousands of people. It was a dangerous place, a barren place with few resources, and a place that neither Mingu Province nor Zhong Province would pay attention to. It was frequented by new oracles from Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials all year round. Not to mention immortals and itinerant cultivators, even some little demon beasts who had just gained sentience and learned how to absorb natural energy to cultivate were all killed. Therefore, there was nothing worth paying attention to in this mountain range, which was millions of miles in circumference. But, as the saying goes, it is darkest under the lamp. An itinerant heaven immortal named Immortal Gord had colluded with a group of itinerant cultivators and built a large immortal market in this nameless mountain range. After hundreds of years of development, because of the protection of the oracles from Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials, and the fact that Immortal Gourd was extremely cautious, the market had developed into the largest, safest, and most secretive immortal market in both Zhong Province and Mingu Province. But the market had strict rules and extremely complicated safety regulations. Immortals who entered and left the market could only be introduced by an absolutely reliable acquaintance through the teleportation formations set up everywhere. So far, no outsider had ever found out where the Gourd Immortal Market was located in this mountain range, and no one had ever found out who was the power behind it. 500 miles underground under an unknown mountain, there was a naturally formed karst cave shaped like a gourd. It was where the Gourd Immortal Market was located. The natural calabash-shaped cave was 300 miles long. The smaller part of the calabash had a diameter of 130 miles, while the larger part had a diameter of 270 miles. Countless shops floated in the huge gourd-shaped space, divided into 9 distinct levels from top to bottom. The shops on the top floor were all tall and magnificent palace-like buildings. These buildings were all opened by the most powerful immortal alliances and cultivation clans in Zhong Province and Mingu Province. One of them, with a radius of 4 miles, was the most gorgeous and luxurious shop with 9 entrances. It was none other than the Myriad Immortal Palace, which was opened in the Gourd Immortal Market by the Union of Myriad Immortals. It mainly sold all kinds of flying swords and magical artifacts, as well as medicinal pills and talismans. At the same time, it purchased all valuable natural treasures. From the top to the bottom, the size and specifications of the shops were reduced. The shops at the lowest level were simply some 2- or 3-storied small buildings made of green bricks and green tiles. These shops were the strongholds of some small itinerant cultivator forces. They did some small business to exchange for some energy stones for their cultivation. Occasionally, they would be lucky enough to receive some valuable natural treasures, which they would immediately send to the shops opened by major forces such as Myriad Immortal Palace in exchange for a large amount of energy stones and immortal stones. There were more than 7,000 shops run by these small powers in the entire Gourd Immortal Market. The vast space was divided into 9 floors, and each floor was separated by streets condensed from clouds and mist. The space between the shops was extremely vast, and with all kinds of complicated restrictive and defensive formations, it could protect the privacy of the customers who came to the Gourd Immortal Market very well. Immortal Gourd, who controlled the entire Gourd Immortal Market, had spent a great deal of effort and money to build this place. He had actually obtained hundreds of huge stone pillars from the Directorate of Celestials and erected them on the streets. Dazzling green light filled the entire cave, and no one with stealth or escape art could hide in the light. Connected to the spirit fire in the earth veins, these stone pillars formed a powerful earth fire ray. If anyone dared to cause trouble in the Gourd Immortal Market, the green fire spewed out from the hundreds of giant stone pillars was enough to melt an ordinary gold immortal. With such strict protection, there had never been any accidents since the establishment of the Gourd Immortal Market. Lu Buwei was sitting in the backyard of a small palace on the 3rd floor of Gourd Immortal Market, flipping through the thick account book in front of him with his fingers. While mentally calculating all the inflow and outflow of this month, he was jotting down lines of numbers in another account book. Gradually, a complacent smile appeared on Lu Buwei's face. Shaking his head and humming a little tune, he wrote down the last few numbers in the account book with satisfaction. In just a few years, after being seriously wounded and fleeing from the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, Lu Buwei had wandered to Pangu continent. But with his means and ability, it did not take him long to sneak into the Gourd Immortal Market. First, he took shelter as the manager of an ordinary shop. After spending a year recuperating from his injury, he immediately killed the shop owner and his whole family, took their souls, and reformed them into heavenly ghosts. With his business skills, Lu Buwei had established a business in the Gourd Immortal Market in just a few years. He had expanded from a medium-sized shop on the 7th level to a large chamber of commerce on the 3rd level of the market. Now, Lu Buwei's spring and autumn trading had hundreds of employees, including dozens of heaven immortals. The monthly income of energy stones and immortal stones was astronomical. In the past few years, the Lu clan, who stayed in outer heavenly realms, had also sent a large number of elites to Pangu continent. Lu Buwei had also summoned his clan members and asked them to set up shops in Gourd Immortal Market, while running various businesses outside. On the surface, Lu Buwei only had one shop, spring and autumn trading, but in fact, there were as many as 18 large trading houses controlled by his clan in Gourd Immortal Market alone. These 18 trading houses were originally owned by the itinerant cultivator clans on Pangu continent, but Lu Buwei had gradually infiltrated and eroded their strength with various shady means. Now, of the 5,000 people in these clans, only about 1,000 were left, and their souls had been imprisoned by Lu Buwei, making them all slaves and lackeys of the clan. Lu Buwei's ability to rebuild such a large business in such a short time was truly amazing. After checking the account book of this month's income, Lu Buwei opened the door of the secret chamber and stored the account book inside. After that, he admired the mountains of immortal stones and other rare treasures in the chamber, and Lu Buwei laughed heartily for a while. Because he was in a good mood, after leaving the secret chamber, Lu Buwei went to his bedroom, where he ordered a few juniors to bring him a few girls who had been abducted yesterday, and gave them a good time. These girls were all stunning beauties, and they had all been abducted from their clans and sold as slaves by slave traders among the immortals and itinerant cultivators. As Lu Buwei was very interested in female charms, he immediately bought these few girls and kept them as his private property. Today was the first time he had taken care of these unfortunate girls. After torturing these girls to his heart's content and robbing them of their chastity in the most brutal way possible, Lu Buwei, who was in a better mood, took a shower and dressed up like a rich old official, swaggered into the main hall of the spring and autumn trading house, eagerly attending to the guests. The chief manager, second manager, and third manager in the lobby were all Lu Buwei's descendants. When they saw Lu Buwei personally attending to the customers in the lobby, these managers and workers worked very hard, trying their best to attract customers with the best attitude, lest Lu Buwei would find out about their mistakes. Spring and Autumn Enterprises' luck was quite good today. In just a quarter of an hour after Lu Buwei personally took charge of the main hall, more than a dozen loose cultivators had come to sell the spirit herbs they had gathered. Among them, there were a few extremely valuable herbs. Lu Buwei gladly gave these itinerant cultivators a good price and bought all the spirit herbs. Among them, the price of a violet dragon blood fruit alone was 100,000 times more than all the energy stones he had paid. The violet dragon blood fruit was an upper-grade medicinal ingredient that could be used to concoct gold immortal pills, and Lu Buwei had bought it and a few other spirit herbs of similar grade at the price of a mid-grade heaven immortal pill. Lu Buwei had made a great profit from this transaction. Just as Lu Buwei was about to return to the backyard with a few spirit herbs in his hands, Patriarch Yuan Hua, with a gloomy face, followed an itinerant heaven immortal cultivator and walked slowly through the front door of spring and autumn trading. Lu Buwei's body suddenly trembled. He took a deep breath and couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Why is this blood energy so dense? Tiske, it will bring great benefits to my heavenly ghost grand magic." Patriarch Yuan Hua shuddered as well. He stopped and turned to look at Lu Buwei, then arched his brows in astonishment and said, "Someone has actually formed the body of a heavenly ghost? Hee, if my blood sea is guarded by tens of thousands of heavenly ghosts from outer heavenly domains, its power will increase by more than 100 times. Especially my blood-draining ghost flag, I need a lot of fiends and heavenly ghosts in it. I was worried that I did not have a place to find heavenly ghosts." Separated by a distance of hundreds of feet, Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua looked at each other from a distance. Their eyes flickered and flickered, showing their deep friendship. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Lu Buwei put down the herbs in his hand and hurried out of the door. He cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. "Please forgive me for not going out to meet you, honorable guests." Patriarch Yuan Hua grinned and said, "It is fate that brings us together. If fellow Taoists can work together with me in cultivation, it will bring great benefits to both you and to me." the Blood Sea Grand Magic and the boundless heavenly ghosts will bring both our great das. After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded reservedly and said, "If fellow Taoist can acknowledge me as your master, I'll teach you all the secrets of the Blood Sea. What do you think?" Cultivating the Blood Sea Grand Magic with the body of a heavenly ghost was an excellent aptitude. As Patriarch Yuan Hua was all alone now, he really wanted to take in a few disciples. Patriarch Yuan Hua knew very well that if he wanted to make a living in the world of cultivators, how could he not have a few disciples? Acknowledge Patriarch Yuan Hua as his master? Lu Buwei frowned. No matter what, he was the leader of a clan, and he was an ambitious and ruthless man. How could he acknowledge someone as his master so easily? Patriarch Yuan Hua did not say anything. He smiled faintly and unleashed his blood and energy, unleashing an enormous pressure that forced Lu Buwei to take a few steps back. Lu Buwei looked at Patriarch Yuan Hua with surprise and delight, then quickly bowed and said, "That's great. But, Senior, please come in and have a chat." Patriarch Yuan Hua laughed. Ignoring the itinerant heaven immortal who brought him into Gourd Immortal Market, he strode into spring and autumn trading. Chapter 685. Patriarch Yuan Hua and Lu Buwei sat opposite each other in a secret chamber in the backyard of spring and autumn trading. The chamber was simply furnished, consisting of a bed, 2 hassocks, and an incense burner shaped like a mountain in the middle of the chamber. The warm fragrance coming out of it made one feel warm all over, but once inhaled, it would turn into a stream of cold spring water that flowed through one's body, stimulating one's spirit and having the effect of driving away evil spirits. A faint blood-red light could be seen drifting beneath Patriarch Yuan Hua's body, and a plume of blood energy rose from the top of his head, forming a cloud platform 30 feet in circumference. 3 blood-colored lotus flowers the size of water tanks were bobbing up and down. There were 18 lotus thrones in the middle of the 3 blood-colored lotus flowers, but they were empty. These were the Dharma thrones of the blood-draining fiends that Patriarch Yuan Hua had learned from the Blood Sea Grand Magic. On each of these lotus thrones should be a blood fiend cultivated from the blood essence and souls of hundreds of millions of living beings. When Lord Blood Ocean was at his peak, the weakest of the 18 blood-draining fiends he had condensed had the cultivation base of a 9th-tier primordial immortal. When they joined forces, he even dared to break into the celestial court alone and abduct the fairies serving the great celestial emperor. But now, Lord Blood Ocean was only left with a broken wisp of his true spirit and had fused with Patriarch Yuan Hua. Although all the Blood Sea Grand Magic scriptures had been passed down, no one knew who killed him, nor did they know the origin of that ancient celestial fiend, Li Xuezi, or the relationship between him and Lord Blood Ocean. Naturally, these 18 blood-draining fiends were gone, and Patriarch Yuan Hua had to work hard to condense them. If he were to condense them out of thin air, the amount of blood essence and souls consumed would be astronomical, and the energy and mental strength consumed would be terrifying. But, if he could get 18 heavenly ghosts who had achieved a certain level of cultivation base, let them devour a large amount of their own blood essence and souls, and then refine them into incorporeal bodies in the Blood Sea Fiend flame, he could save a lot of time and condense them into blood-draining fiends. More importantly, the blood-draining fiends refined from heavenly ghosts would have the ability to travel through the void, and when used together with the Blood Sea Grand Magic, their power would be increased by 100 times. If he could obtain the strongest undead heavenly ghost king in Ghost Domain and use it as the true form of the blood fiend, the mere thought of its power was enough to drive Patriarch Yuan Hua crazy. Patriarch Yuan Hua focused his mind and circulated his energy, slowly explaining the secret of Blood Sea Grand Magic word by word. Every time he uttered a word, a thumb-sized blood-colored lotus flower would fall from the blood cloud above his head. As soon as the blood-colored lotus landed on Lu Buwei, it immediately melted into his body, transforming into a stream of pure magical power that circulated through his entire body and quickly fused with his immortal soul. Lu Buwei felt like he was floating in the air. The blood in his body was getting thicker and thicker, and the magic power contained in his blood was getting stronger and stronger. His blood flowed faster and faster, and gradually his blood vessels swelled. Blood surged in his blood vessels like raging dragons. The surging sound of blood echoed in the secret room, even making the Zhangtal bronze censer buzzing in the middle of the room. Just by inheriting Patriarch Yuan Hua's foundational cultivation technique of Blood Sea Grand Magic, Lu Buwei had already sensed the tremendous benefits it brought. In order to win over Lu Buwei's heart, Patriarch Yuan Hua had not hesitated to use his prime blood energy to impart his cultivation technique to Lu Buwei. As a result, Lu Buwei had already formed the body of a heavenly ghost, and he had a wisp of the aura of the indestructible body of heavenly ghosts. With Patriarch Yuan Hua's help, Lu Buwei felt as if his body was on fire. Hot air billowed around him, and an endless power was growing inside him. Gradually, he had an impulse that he could shatter the stars and overturn the earth with just one punch. Originally, Lu Buwei's cultivation base was not very high. But as Patriarch Yuan Hua imparted his cultivation technique to him, his cultivation base was soaring at a tremendous rate. The Blood Sea Grand Magic was bizarre and evil, and there was no limit to one's cultivation base. When one's cultivation base grew stronger, the sea of blood would grow larger, and so would one's cultivation base. All the magic power was stored in the sea of blood, and it had nothing to do with the cultivator's true form. When one attained the mastery of the Blood Sea Grand Magic, one's fleshly body and the sea of blood would merge into one. Then, one would only need to crazily extract the blood essence and souls of living beings to conjure the myriad spirits' blood pool. With that, one would be able to rapidly improve their magic power, just like what Patriarch Yuan Hua had done on Myriad Immortals' planet. If one could gather the blood essence and souls of trillions of living beings to conjure the myriad spirits' blood pool at the same time, and then completely absorb it with one's own sea of blood, one would be able to step into the realm of primordial in just one day. Patriarch Yuan Hua kept teaching Lu Buwei the various essences and wonders of the Blood Sea Grand Magic. Lu Buwei was so happy that he almost burst out laughing. Respectfully, he learned all the secrets of the Blood Sea Grand Magic from Patriarch Yuan Hua. When Patriarch Yuan Hua put away the sea of blood and the blood-colored lotus, Lu Buwei did not need any more words from Patriarch Yuan Hua. He leaped off the cloud bed, dropped to his knees respectfully, and kowtowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. "Master, I, Lu Buwei, am fated to be your disciple. I will definitely be filial to Master with all my heart, and do my best to develop our sect." Lu Buwei's eyes narrowed into slits as he smiled. Patriarch Yuan Hua was obviously a formidable immortal, and with his support, Lu Buwei's life on Pangu continent would be much better. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded with satisfaction. With Lu Buwei, a disciple who was obviously rich and had many juniors, he would be able to rebuild Yuan Hua sect. Once he had trained all his disciples into immortals, his cultivation base should have recovered to its original level. At that time, he would definitely seek revenge from Wu Qi. Laughing hideously, Patriarch Yuan Hua began to fantasize about tearing Wu Qi into 1,000 pieces, seizing Princess Zhang Lu, and having fun with her. With Lu Buwei's cooperation, he could keep summoning countless heavenly ghosts from Ghost Domain and fuse them into his sea of blood, then absorb as much blood essence and soul energy as he could on Pangu continent to restore his cultivation base. With that, it would not take long for him to seek revenge from Wu Qi. Lu Buwei was a formidable figure. Just a few laughs from Patriarch Yuan Hua had allowed Lu Buwei to see through the lust in his heart. Lu Buwei smiled and left the secret chamber respectfully, then summoned a few of his grandsons. Before long, a dozen beautiful girls were sent into the secret chamber. Lu Buwei frankly admitted to Patriarch Yuan Hua that it was a little gift from him to show filial piety to his master. The door of the secret chamber slowly closed. Standing in front of it, Lu Buwei cocked his head to listen to the movements inside. When he heard the ripping of clothes as well as the screams and begging of the girls, Lu Buwei smiled contentedly. Flicking his sleeves, Lu Buwei laughed in a low voice and said, "Why are you begging? Why are you crying? You are lucky to be able to serve the old immortal with your bodies. Hee, if you can give birth to a son or a daughter for the old immortal." A bright gleam flashed in Lu Buwei's eyes as he told his grandsons to guard the door carefully. After that, he strode out with his sleeves fluttering. In the meeting hall in the backyard, Lu Bui summoned all his descendants and told them that he had become Patriarch Yuan Hua's disciple. He asked them to start checking the resources they had and quickly transform from the mode of running a merchant to the mode of running a sect. An idea had formed in Lu Bui's mind. With Patriarch Yuan Hua as his disciple, he could use him to build a sect of immortal cultivators with the Lu clan as the controller behind the scenes. With that, the power he had in his hands would be strengthened, and the Lu clan would have another layer of protection, and the safety of the Lu clan would be greatly improved. Little Wu Qi, hee, I'll definitely make you pay for what you've done to me in the past. Lu Bui narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed in a deep voice. After pondering for a while, he issued various orders to his descendants, and the huge Lu clan immediately began to operate at full speed. Over the next few days, Lu Bui consulted Patriarch Yuan Hua about various mystic techniques every day, while the Lu clan began to pool all kinds of resources and manpower. A large number of Lu clan members and their subordinates had become Patriarch Yuan Hua's disciples. In just a few days, the newly established Yuan Hua sect had recruited over 3,000 disciples, including 60 heaven immortals. The newly established Yuan Hua sect was much stronger than the sect that Patriarch Yuan Hua had spent several dozens of periods to build. What made Patriarch Yuan Hua even more satisfied was that Lu Bui was extremely wealthy. All his disciples were given the best magical treasures, spirit items, immortal items, and many others. Even the most ordinary gold core cultivators were given magical items that were several grades higher than their level, especially those with outstanding aptitudes. Not to mention the spirit pills, spirit talismans, and other personal items, all of which were the best of the best. How could Yuan Hua sect in the past compare with the army of money that Lu Bui had meticulously built? Patriarch Yuan Hua was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he began to teach all the essences of Blood Sea Grand Magic to his disciples according to their cultivation base. Blood Sea Grand Magic was an ancient top-grade Fiend League cultivation technique. It allowed them to cultivate at an extremely fast speed, and apart from having to guard against the backlashes of inner demons, there were almost no bottlenecks. But even if they were attacked by inner demons, as long as they took precautions in advance, the inner demons would be devoured by the blood sea and turned into blood-draining fiends. In just half a month, the disciples of Yuan Hua sect had preliminarily condensed their blood and energy into a small sea of blood inside their bodies. Once the sea of blood was formed, as long as one drop of blood essence escaped from it, they would be immortal, unless all the blood drops were destroyed in an instant. With such a powerful ancient fiend cultivation technique, Yuan Hua sect's morale soared instantly. Bursting with confidence, Lu Bui began to discuss with Patriarch Yuan Hua how to invade Gourd Immortal Market. It would be best if they could kill Immortal Gourd and then take over the cave abode. The only thing to worry about was that they did not know who was the master behind the Immortal Gourd. The Spirit Vein and Spirit Qi under the Gourd Immortal Market were not very good. The Gourd Immortal Market was not a good place to set up a sect. While Lu Bui and Patriarch Yuan Hua were discussing the matter, one of Immortal Gourd's executing disciples suddenly sent a secret message to all the immortals in Gourd Immortal Market. Someone was offering a huge reward for the head of one of King Deyu's personal guards, and anyone who could kill him would be rewarded with a huge amount of immortal stones, energy stones, and other materials. If anyone could capture Tan Lang's personal guard alive and hand him over to Immortal Gourd, the reward would be a cave abode with an immortal vein. A cave abode with an immortal vein. Lu Bui and Patriarch Yuan Hua were tempted immediately. Chapter 686. Many immortals in Gourd Immortal Market had gathered together. It was a wooden hall at the bottom of Gourd Immortal Market. All the planks were made of ordinary pine wood. Although the material was simple, it took a lot of effort to grind them. The patterns of the planks were put together to form a large pattern of clouds and dragons flying in the sky. There was once a bored immortal who estimated that the cost of gathering so many pine planks that coincidentally formed such a large cloud dragon diagram would be equivalent to using 10 times the amount of immortal stones to build such a seemingly ordinary hall. A large number of hassocks were placed in the spacious hall, on which sat Lu Buwei, Patriarch Yuan Hua, and a large number of immortals, who were divided into groups according to their relationship with each other. At the end of the hall was a 3 feet tall wooden platform, on which sat a gaunt Taoist in a yellow Taoist robe. A fist-sized gourd hung from his bun. He was Immortal Gourd, the manager of Gourd Immortal Market. Lu Buwei studied Immortal Gourd curiously. This was the first time he had seen Immortal Gourd in person after running the market for several years. Patriarch Yuan Hua gave Immortal Gourd a glance, then sent a voice transmission to Lu Buwei, "Gold Immortal, don't provoke him for the time being. When I've gathered enough blood essence and soul and restored my cultivation base, killing him will be a piece of cake." Lu Buwei's heart skipped a beat. Immortal Gourd actually had the cultivation base of a gold immortal? What tier of a gold immortal was he? What kind of connections did he have that allowed him to run his business here when Pangu continent was in a mess? Gradually, more and more immortals arrived. When the immortal in charge of Myriad Immortal Mansion arrived with a few attendants, Immortal Gourd waved his sleeve, and 20 iron cabinets, each 6 feet in length, width, and height, appeared in front of everyone. The doors of the cabinets opened silently, revealing a pile of neatly polished immortal stones. Immortal Gourd glanced at the crowd of immortals and said calmly, "Kill Tan Lang, and you will be rewarded handsomely. This is the deposit that my client left with me." After pondering for a moment, Immortal Gourd said, "The client has a very high reputation in Gourd Immortal Market. I can't reveal his identity, but as long as you kill Tan Lang, you'll be rewarded handsomely." With a flip of his palm, a wisp of purple aura that was 3 feet long and as thick as a thumb appeared on Spirit Gourd's palm. With a flick of his finger, this wisp of chi flew past the immortals at lightning speed. The immortals all used their divine senses to sense this chi and were shocked to find that it was an extremely pure and high-quality immortal chi. The immortal energy contained in this wisp of immortal energy was almost equivalent to all the immortal energy contained in a high-grade immortal stone. This wisp of immortal energy is a wisp of energy randomly extracted from the cave abode with the immortal vein promised by the client. Immortal Gourd waved his hand and retracted the wisp of purple energy. With a smile on his face, he said, "That immortal abode is extremely secretive, and the client will swear a heart demon oath that as long as any fellow immortal can capture Tan Lang alive and bring him to me, the immortal abode will be handed over properly, and no one under the heaven will ever know its location again." Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua exchanged a glance. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded with a smile. It seemed that they had to capture that kid named Tan Lang alive and bring him to Immortal Gourd. Although he was King Yang Qiu's personal guard, it was worth it for the sake of an immortal abode of excellent quality. It would be very risky to plot against a king of Diyu, but how could it be risky to plot against a mere personal guard? There were mountains of immortal stones, countless precious treasures, and the promise of an immortal abode. The immortals in charge of the various powers in Gourd Immortal Market decided at the same time to use their respective forces to capture Tan Lang alive. One after another, they took a jade slip from Immortal Gourd, which recorded Tan Lang's current location. In fact, it was not Tan Lang's address, but the location of King Yang Qiu's army's encampment. As King Yang Qiu's personal guard, where else could he go if not by his side? In addition to the address, the jade slip also contained a clear portrait of Tan Lang, so clear that every hair on Tan Lang's face could be seen clearly. Next to the portrait were also the divine abilities and magic that Tan Lang was good at. For example, his cultivation base of the true body of heaven and earth scripture was very close to that of the second Pangu heaven, and his mastery of all kinds of magic and curses was extremely profound, but no one knew the exact level of his cultivation base. A general of Diyu who cultivated both magic and fleshly body. Some of the immortals in charge of the minor powers frowned when they saw the information. It was relatively easy to deal with a general or an oracle of Diyu, but if there was a freak who cultivated both magic and fleshly body, it would take a lot of immortals with the same cultivation base as him to kill him. And if they wanted to capture him alive, it would take even more effort and planning. But Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua had already left the Great Hall with a smile on their faces, and the immortals in charge of the major powers, including Myriad Immortal Mansion, had also left confidently. They were in a hurry to inform their respective powers to send powerful immortals to capture Tan Lang as soon as possible. Otherwise, someone else would take advantage of the situation. Now that De Yu's army was carrying out a devastating attack on Myriad Immortal Alliance, no one knew how many itinerant cultivators and itinerant immortals would be killed. If what Immortal Gord said was true, that the immortal abode was very well hidden and could avoid the search of De Yu's army, then it would be of great value to any power. Not to mention that thousands of powers in Gord Immortal Market were already preparing to deal with Wu Qi. Wu Qi was provoking Yu Qingqing in a slightly mocking tone in the Great Hall of King Yang Qiu's army. His rhetorical question made Yu Qingqing's face turn purple. Wu Qi knew that the old fellow must have suffered a lot in the formation, and there was no way he could break it. Yu Qingqing's face turned purple with anger, and a group of men and women in silk robes, all carefully selected handsome men and beautiful women with impeccable manners and bearing, jumped out at the same time, pointing their fingers at Wu Qi and scolding him with their words and pen. It was especially so for a young man, who was the most handsome, had the most elegant figure, and was clad in the most luxurious clothes. He approached Wu Qi step by step, pointing his finger at Wu Qi's nose and began to teach him a lesson. "How dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you disrespect Master Yu? You're just a reckless fool who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you think you're qualified to study the formation that even Master Yu can't break?" The young man's saliva almost splashed on Wu Qi's face. "Look at you," he said, shaking his head. "I can tell you're from a humble background. I even doubt that you can read. You can break the formation? What a joke." Wu Qi did not say a word. He folded his arms over his chest and looked coldly at the group of arrogant and presumptuous young men in front of him. A mocking sneer hung at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of disdain. His attitude had infuriated the group of men and women who were dressed in luxurious clothing. One after another, they accused Wu Qi of being disrespectful to Master Yu, saying that he was a vulgar, rude, lazy, incompetent, arrogant, and despotic man who deserved to die 1,000 times for his crimes. Standing next to the map, King Yang Qiu watched with a straight face. After a quarter of an hour, when the young men and women had almost run out of saliva, he snorted coldly. Just then, the young man who pointed at Wu Qi's nose and scolded him snapped, "You bastard, it's clear that even your parents are not." He could scold Wu Qi, but Wu Qi treated it as a pack of mad dogs, and he did not even have the motivation to get angry. But when the young man insulted his parents, Wu Qi's eyes turned cold, and he kicked the young man in the face. A dark shadow tore through the air, and a muffled boom rang out as Wu Qi's legs smashed down heavily. The young man was born with a sharp tongue, but apart from that, his cultivation base was really weak. Wu Qi's kick smashed down, breaking his tibia, spine, sternum, ribs, and scapula at the same time. Cracking noises rang out endlessly, and before the young man could even let out a miserable howl, he was sent flying backward with blood spraying out from his body. The group of young men and women in the great hall cried out in alarm and jumped back like frightened rabbits. Wu Qi gave them a cold glance and said coolly, "You can scold me, I don't care. But if you scold my parents, I deserve to kill you." Yu Qingqing's face turned blue with anger. He jumped up from the four-wheeled wooden chair, pointed at Wu Qi and bellowed, "How dare you kill people in front of His Highness, you little brat? Do you still have any respect for His Highness?" With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi put down his arms, cupped his fist, and bowed to King Yang Qiu. "If I may ask, old Mr. Yu," he said in a deep voice, "before His Highness could speak to me, these ignorant men and women had already scolded me. Do they still have any respect for His Highness?" Wu Qi snorted coldly, tilted his head up and said proudly, "But I was the one who let them insult me for 15 minutes without saying a single word. Do you think I'm disrespecting your Highness?" Yu Qingqing was so angry that his throat grew thicker. Roaring in exasperation, he pointed at Wu Qi and shouted at King Yongqiu, "Your Highness, please order me to kill this fiend." King Yongqiu gave Yu Qingqing a cold look and asked coolly, "Can Master Yu break the formation in the valley?" Yu Qingqing paused for a moment, then said awkwardly, "I'm trying to break the formation." King Yongqiu ignored Yu Qingqing. He beckoned to Wu Qi and said, "Tan Lang, come here and study this formation for me. Let's see if you can break it. I've received information that the Lord of Wandering Immortal Hall is hiding in this valley. If you can break it, I'll give you a great merit." With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to King Yongqiu. Then he strode to King Yongqiu's side and began to study the various scenes in the map. Yu Qingqing's face turned extremely unsightly. Pointing at the young man who was killed by Wu Qi with a kick, he said coldly, "Your Highness, this man is the eldest grandson of the prefecture overseer of Yu Province." King Yongqiu looked at Yu Qingqing coldly, and after a full 10 minutes, he said coolly, "The prefecture overseer of Yu Province has failed in educating his son. He has insulted the parents of one of my generals with filthy words. It's a very fair and reasonable punishment. What do you think, Master Yu?" Yu Qingqing opened his mouth but could not say a word for a long time. Meanwhile, Wu Qi, who was studying the formation, smiled. Just as he was about to report his analysis of the formation to King Yongqiu, his heart suddenly beat 49 times violently. With each beat, a great amount of blood rushed through his body. Wu Qi felt waves of numbness all over his body, as if a dark cloud was pressing down on him from above. Vaguely, Wu Qi sensed a terrible killing intent coming at him. Chapter 687. The Yu Academy had planted quite a number of spies in the Yu clan of the Zhong province, and this was only to be expected. Yu Qingqing was born in the Yu clan in Liangzhu, and was the clan master of all the Yu clan in the world. It was from Liangzhu that Yu Miao went to the Yu clan in Zhong province to take up the post of clan master. He brought a large number of Yu clan members with him to help him lay a foundation in Zhong province, and among them were people from Yu Academy. As Yu Miao served as the clan master in Zhong province for so many years, Yu Academy's power had infiltrated everywhere in Zhong province. Laughing complacently, Yu Qingqing turned to his disciples and said, "I'm 70% sure I can break the formation in the valley. But why did I have to act as if I was helpless against that formation and even let the young prince lose a large number of people inside? Go back and think about the mystery, and report it to me in a few days. I'll take it as the topic of your exam this year." After helping Yu Miao win the power of Hai Province, Tan Lang had obtained all kinds of spells from the Directorate of Celestials. Then he showed an amazing aptitude for cultivating both magic and fleshly body, and in just a few days he had achieved a profound attainment in magic. Early this morning he killed Yu Lei, the son of Yu Miao, the great elder of the Yu clan, and at the same time summoned a ghost god to seriously injure Yu Miao. Many of Yu Qingqing's disciples bowed and praised at the same time, "Master is brilliant. What a good plan. What a good plan." Cold sweat was dripping from Yu Qingqing's forehead. "He, having a supreme oracle cultivated by yourself and borrowing the power of other supreme oracles are two completely different things. The young prince's schemes are indeed deep. No wonder he didn't give any face today and completely sided with that brat." Sitting on a comfortable bed wrapped in golden clouds in his tent, Yu Qingqing gave Wu Qi his final evaluation with a cold grin on his face, his left arm wrapped around a little maidservant in a green dress, and his right arm leaning against a pretty maidservant in a white dress, asking the maidservant to clean his ears with a set of special tools. If he can break the simplest heavenly thunder formation derived from the interaction and restraint of 5 elements, does he really think he can break the star Luo formation in front of us? Yu Qingqing sneered and threw the scroll aside disdainfully. "Remember, this is my strategy of retreating in order to advance," he said coolly. "Let the young prince put this child in an important position. After this child suffers losses in the formation, I will make a move to break the formation in one fell swoop. If the young prince doesn't want to put him in an important position, I can't. In front of all the disciples, he reached his hand into the little maidservant's collar and pulled out 2 fair, smooth breasts. Then, he slowly played with them in his hand and gently flicked the 2 snow-white lumps of red berries. "I'll give you some hints," he said softly. "Master Lao Wang has trusted me all these years, but young master has his own ideas. He has always felt that he feels uncomfortable when I am telling him what to do." Tan Lang was a man of the wilderness, and his background was unknown. He was talented and intelligent, and had figured out the technique of absorbing Pangu's sacred energy to strengthen his fleshly body. After joining the army in Anhui City in Anlu County, Zhong Province, he was quickly put in an important position and was recruited by Yu Miao's grandson, Yu Zong. Eventually, he became Yu Miao's right-hand man in the struggle for power. Impulsive. Yu Qingqing rose to his feet angrily, then gritted his teeth and cried out in a low voice, "Go to the Great Hall and find out what Tan Lang is up to. From today on, I want to know everything he does. Mobilize all the disciples of Yu Academy in Mingu Province. No matter where he goes, what he does, what he eats, what he drinks, what he says, who he meets, and even which woman he sleeps with, I want to know everything." The crowd of men and women hurriedly bowed and answered. Their hearts were filled with respect and fear for their master, and for a moment, they felt that Yu Qingqing had grown much taller. Sighing softly, Yu Qingqing beckoned to one of his disciples. The disciple hurriedly pulled out a scroll from under his sleeve and handed it to Yu Qingqing respectfully. While Yu Qingqing was flipping through the scroll and reading the information on it, the disciple bowed slightly and began to introduce the information he had spent a lot of time gathering to Yu Qingqing and his brothers and sisters. The eyes of Yu Qingqing and his disciples lit up, and they nodded repeatedly, already having their own plans in mind. With King Yang Qiu's status, power, and financial resources, it was almost certain that he would do everything he could to push Wu Qi into the realm of Supreme Oracle. Now, King Yang Qiu could only rely on the Supreme Oracles of Yu Clan to act, and he could not completely control them. But Wu Qi was different. He had no foundation or background, and King Yang Qiu had pushed him to the level of Supreme Oracle, so he was still at King Yang Qiu's beck and call. He was wounded by a fiend immortal? Hundreds of millions of evil spirits poured into his spiritual ocean and trapped and killed his soul? Even the oracles of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials said they could not save him? Only the Supreme High Priest can kill the evil spirit and save his soul? With a cold snort, Yu Qingqing said in a flat tone, "Tan Lang killed him, so why should we explain? Remember what happened 6 months ago. When I asked you and your senior brothers to serve in Yu Province, how did the prefecture overseer respond? Since he is unwilling to cooperate with us, I'll let him kill one of his sons as a warning. If he is sensible, he will naturally do as we say in the future. If he still doesn't understand how to cooperate with us, he will spend 3 months in seclusion to reflect on his mistakes. Next time, it may not be a good time." Wu Qi, who was disguised as Tan Lang, was very impulsive. He could not believe that he killed someone in front of so many people. But impulsive young men were always easy to deal with. The man King Yang Qiu had brought here was so impatient that even if he had some ability, he could not overpower Yu Qingqing. It was obvious that in just 2 or 3 years, Tan Lang had not only made tremendous progress in magic cultivation base, but he had also organized a blood sacrifice and won the approval of the ghosts and deities in the outer realms. Unexpectedly, he now had a powerful ancestor god to worship. The ancestor god who could control thunderbolts seemed to be more powerful than Gui Shao, the ancestor god worshipped by Yu Miao. At least, according to the information sent by the disciples of Yu Academy who witnessed the fight between Wu Qi and Yu Miao today, the ghost god, shrouded in thunderbolts, seemed to have rushed straight into Gui Shao's lair to fight him. Yu Qingqing liked pedantic people. Such people had a moral bottom line in their hearts, and they were also the easiest to deal with. He had merely insulted his own parents, and before he could even finish his sentence, he had brazenly killed them? What was the big deal about being insulted? Yu Qingqing had done a lot of things over the years. If he could not let go of some of the perseverance in his heart, how could he make a name for himself in this world? In front of his male and female disciples, Yu Qingqing squeezed the little maidservant's breasts, narrowed his eyes, and chuckled to himself. His disciples smiled apologetically and hurriedly tried to recall if their elders had offended their master in any way. If they had to send a letter back as soon as possible and ask them to apologize to Yu Qingqing as soon as possible. Narrowing his eyes, Yu Qingqing played with the little maidservant's body while analyzing Tan Lang's character to his disciples. With a cold snort, Yu Qingqing took off his clothes and pressed the two maidservants down on the bed. It was in Ningbo City, Hai Province, when King Yangqiu was patrolling with his generals to prevent myriad immortal alliance from stirring up trouble, that he first saw Wu Qi leading a group of weak soldiers and making a group of heaven immortals flee with their tails between their legs. Wu Qi's fighting style was very popular with King Yangqiu, and at that time, King Yangqiu had the idea of promoting Wu Qi. Later, when Wu Qi was serving in Bo Yunting's army, he actually broke a formation deployed by a gold immortal and killed more than 100 gold immortals of the alliance, which made King Yangqiu, who had suffered heavy casualties in the battle, decide to ask for Wu Qi's army from Bo Zhongfu. A few young men and women sat respectfully on 2 rows of stools in the tent, looking up at Yu Qingqing with eager eyes. When the maidservant finished picking out one of his ears and he turned his head to change his posture, a young man in white rose to his feet, cupped his fist at Yu Qingqing and said, "Master, youngest brother was killed by Tan Lang on the spot. How are we going to explain this to the prefecture overseer?" Yu Qingqing smiled reservedly, then grabbed the scroll and hurriedly glanced at a line of words written in red with cinnabar. A freak who cultivated both fleshly body and magic already possessed the soul power of a 9-sun expert. That was to say, as long as he was not an idiot, he would certainly possess the cultivation base of a 9-sun expert in the future. Moreover, the advancement of human oracles was extremely fast, and it was not uncommon for those with excellent aptitude to become supreme oracles in just 100 years. Perhaps in just a few decades, Wu Qi would possess the power of a 9-sun expert, and he even had the potential to break through the realm of supreme oracles in the future. Yu Qingqing took a sip of the fragrant tea with a few slices of fire ginseng in it, twitched his mouth slightly, and added disdainfully, "Pedantic." The scroll contained Wu Qi's personal information. Remember, you have to be prudent in your actions, and you must never be like Tan Lang, who would kill people at the slightest disagreement. After pondering for a long time, Yu Qingqing's face grew gloomier and gloomier. Hundreds of millions of evil spirits. What kind of soul power was that? If Wu Qi had really escaped by absorbing the soul power of hundreds of millions of evil spirits, wouldn't that mean that his current soul power was comparable to that of a 9-sun great oracle? Perhaps the reason why King Yangqiu had hurriedly transferred Wu Qi to serve under him was not because of Wu Qi's ability to crack formations, but because of his potential for future development. Yu Qingqing gave the maidservant's chest a hard squeeze and said angrily, "Why is that Tan Lang so lucky? Hundreds of millions of evil spirits invaded his body, and yet he still managed to survive? He is not a human being. He is a bastard." While Wu Qi and King Yangqiu were examining the formation through the map, Yu Qingqing, who had just lost a great deal of face after having one of his disciples killed by Wu Qi, excused himself with a large group of his disciples and bid farewell to King Yangqiu. Then he left the great hall and returned to the tent where he usually lived. Apart from that, he even found out how Wu Qi had fallen into King Yangqiu's eyes. Yu Qingqing's face gradually turned unsightly. Laughing strangely, he clenched his fingers and crushed the scroll into a puff of ashes. Nodding slowly, he said, "So that's how it is. Not only is Tan Lang's formation-breaking technique amazing, but it turns out that you have taken a fancy to this. He, an evil spirit refined by hundreds of millions of demon immortals. Even a Sun High Priest wouldn't dare to boast that he could survive such an attack. But this kid actually managed to escape from the damage caused by hundreds of millions of evil spirits." Pointing to his head, Yu Qingqing said in a reserved manner, "All of you are my proud disciples, and all of you have brains. Those who work with their minds control others, and those who work with their bodies control others. It's like the difference between a rider and an animal. We are the riders, and Tan Lang and the others are the mounts. You can kill with your mind, but never with your fists. We disdain to do such a vulgar thing. Chapter 688. After spending a full 2 hours studying the formation in the valley, Wu Qi finally shook his head. Your Excellency, I can only roughly see the layout of the formation from here. In order to see through it, I need to conduct a field survey. Even though Wu Qi boasted that his attainments in the Tao of formations were already unparalleled, the Tao of formations he had inherited was too ancient, and he had suffered a loss in Miao Ying Palace many years ago. So, he dared not say that he could crack all the formations. The grand array at the bottom of the valley looked like a grand array of stars. However, if he wanted to see through it completely, he would have to go outside the valley and carefully examine it. He could not use remote sensing to see the array. King Yongqiu folded his arms over his chest and stared at the map for a while, then asked in a flat voice, "Where did you learn the formation?" Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then pulled out a palm-sized jade from under his sleeve. It was simple in shape, shaped like half a cloud, and was carved with extremely exquisite patterns of stars and mountains. The jade was simple in design, with 7 colored spots seeping into its interior, giving it an air of vicissitudes of life. Wu Qi weighed the jade in his hand, then handed it to King Yongqiu reluctantly. This is a catalogue of the Tao of formations that I found by accident when I was hunting in the barren mountains of Anlu County. Wu Qi looked at the jade in King Yongqiu's hand reluctantly and said in a low voice, "There is also a cultivation technique of the immortals in it, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't cultivate it. So, I just focused on studying the formation and ignored everything else." King Yongqiu fiddled with the heavy jade in his hand. Although it was only the size of a palm, it weighed nearly 1,000 kilograms. It was a supreme-grade cloud soul jade, a supreme-grade material used to make all kinds of immortal jade slips. There was a huge amount of information in it. Apart from a complete set of array formation explanations from 1 origin, 2 forms, 3 talents, all the way to the cosmic stars formation, as well as all kinds of ancient divination, prediction, psychic communication, and communication with the veins of the stars and the earth, there was also a complete set of immortal cultivation method, the Dongxian Supreme Sutra. King Yongqiu sent his divine sense into the jade block and quickly browsed through its contents. After wiping out all the immortal cultivation techniques recorded in it, he returned the jade block to Wu Qi with a smile on his face. "Just as you said, the Array Tao catalog inside is not bad. Study it when you have time. However, the immortal cultivation techniques inside are evil and unorthodox techniques, so it's better not to leave them inside." King Yongqiu was very pleased. The fact that Wu Qi was willing to give him the jade so frankly proved that he was very loyal to him. In this way, everything could be explained. How could Wu Qi, a general of Deyu who was born in the wilderness, be so proficient in the Tao of formation? With just a quick glance, King Yongqiu could tell that the Array Tao catalog in the jade block was extraordinary, much more brilliant than all the Array Tao catalog of immortals he had collected in his mansion. When Wu Qi said that he could not cultivate the techniques in the Dongxian Supreme Sutra, King Yongqiu was laughing in his heart. It would be a miracle if you could. According to the information about Wu Qi obtained by King Yongqiu, Tan Lang had figured out the technique of absorbing Pangu's sacred energy to temper his fleshly body in the wilderness, and then went to Anhe City to join the army. As long as one had Pangu's sacred energy in one's body, one could not cultivate any immortal cultivation techniques. This was an iron law that both the Celestial Court and Deyu knew. Fortunately, this kid first comprehended the method to absorb Pangu's sacred energy before he found this jade slip. Otherwise, I would have lost a capable general under my command. TSK, I'm really lucky that he is proficient in the Tao of formation. King Yongqiu looked at Wu Qi cheerfully, then suddenly asked, "If you triple the size of East Sea County, can you let me make a copy of the Array Tao catalog of formation you have learned? I can guarantee that other than myself and you, there are at most 3 people in the world who can study this Array Tao catalog." Wu Qi knew that this was King Yongqiu's condition. As a king who led the army personally, King Yangqiu could not have seen the value of the Array Dao catalog in the jade block. Triple the size of East Sea County? According to the current size of East Sea County, if it was tripled, Wu Qi would have a province under his name. Even though the population of this province was small, it was still a province. Could the total land area of 100 myriad immortals planets be larger than that of Dayu's province? Without hesitation, Wu Qi handed the jade block to King Yangqiu and said, "What's the value of this?" "Your Excellency, you don't have to say that only 3 people can study it. As long as they are your Excellency's trusted subordinates, they can study it at will. My interest lies more in leading an army and fighting a war. As for breaking and dispelling formations, I really think it's a tedious task." King Yangqiu smiled with greater satisfaction and appreciation. He took the jade block, took out a jade slip, and made a copy of all the Array Dao catalog in it. Then he returned the jade slip to Wu Qi, nodded, and said with a smile, "Good, good. Tanlang, you have been so loyal and diligent to me. I will certainly not treat you unfairly." With a wave of his hand, he threw the jade slip to an oracle in a black robe standing behind him and said in a deep voice, "Yu clan has been disrespectful to me. As for the compensation, well, I'll give them all to you. Later, I'll issue an official document to expand the land of East Sea County by 3 times, and then I'll give you a batch of people, livestock, seeds, and money so that you can develop East Sea County as soon as possible." Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed respectfully to King Yangqiu. How did he know I was blackmailing the Yu clan? He thought to himself. I suppose King Yangqiu has a lot of eyes and ears in Zhongning City? Wu Qi stuffed the jade block back into the sleeve of his battle robe. He did not care about the Array Dao catalog copied by King Yangqiu. He had killed so many heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent, and he had seized hundreds of Array Dao catalog and cultivation techniques. The Array Dao catalog he gave to King Yangqiu was nothing more than a doubling or tripling of the power of those itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent. Compared to the complex and vast essence of Array Dao in the Scroll of Stealing, it was like a stream in the middle of a vast ocean, not worth mentioning at all. Moreover, the ultimate heavenly cave scripture was looted from the private collection of an upper-tier heaven immortal whom he had killed. Although it was a good immortal cultivation technique, Wu Qi was not interested in it at all. Putting it in the jade block was just to make King Yangqiu believe Wu Qi's story. And this jade slip was made by Wu Qi himself after he showed his ability to break the formation in Bo Yunting's army. Using the technique Lu Xiaobai used to forge cultural relics and antiques, and his current divine ability and magic power, he deliberately made this antique jade slip to cover up his lie. How could a General Dayu, who was born in the wilderness and cultivated the true body of heaven and earth scripture, be able to break the formation of Bo Yunting's army of 100,000 soldiers? Anyone would have such a question, and by making such a jade slip, he could not only clear his name, but also present it to King Yangqiu, which showed his loyalty. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone, and it could not have been more worthwhile. Sure enough, the Array Dao catalog that Wu Qi looked down upon had brought real benefits to Wu Qi. The territory of East Sea County had rapidly expanded by 3 times, which was equivalent to the territory of a province. Moreover, it was not under the jurisdiction of Zhong Province, which made Wu Qi the local tyrant of the East Sea County. No one would care what he wanted to do. It was a very good deal. Not to mention the population, livestock, seeds, and money that King Yangqiu had promised him. With these things, Wu Qi could definitely speed up the development of East Sea County. Especially with the influx of a large number of foreigners, the people of Great Yen who still stayed in Princess Zhang Li's interstitial world could finally come out for a breath of fresh air. King Yangqiu was overjoyed, and so was Wu Qi. In the Great Hall, many of King Yangqiu's subordinates were looking at the jade slip carefully in the black-robed oracle's hand with eager eyes. These days, King Yangqiu's army had suffered a lot in the face of the various formations laid out by Myriad Immortal Alliance. With this catalog of formations, I'm afraid it will be the Alliance's turn to suffer, isn't it? Because it was Wu Qi who offered the Array Dao catalog, and it seemed that he did not understand its significance to King Yangqiu and even to the entire Great Yu army. What an honest and simple young man he was. The military officers around King Yangqiu also looked at Wu Qi kindly, but at the same time, they were jealous of him. This guy's East Sea County was already ridiculously large, and now that it had expanded by 3 times, did that not mean that he had a province for nothing? A province, and a province directly under King Yangqiu's command. There was no doubt that the East Sea County would become King Yangqiu's most important nail in the periphery of Zhong Province, and Wu Qi, who directly controlled the East Sea County, would also become a very important member of King Yangqiu's power system. With Wu Qi's East Sea County, King Yangqiu had officially extended his hand into the periphery of Zhong Province, directly affecting several nearby first-grade provinces. Even though Yu Mu was also King Yangqiu's subordinate, most of the people in the Yu clan were loyal to Lao Wang. How could they be as loyal and reliable as Wu Qi, who had been directly recruited and promoted by King Yangqiu? Happy, Wu Qi, King Yangqiu, and the others assembled the army and rushed out of the camp toward the huge valley ahead. Along the way, King Yangqiu kept Wu Qi by his side and personally introduced the various changes in the formation ahead to Wu Qi, as well as the various scenes when the soldiers were killed in the formation. The military officers looked at the scene with envy and jealousy, knowing that Wu Qi had become King Yangqiu's favorite. Like a torrent that had broken through a dam, the army of tens of thousands of soldiers crossed hundreds of miles in just a quarter of an hour and arrived in front of the huge valley. There was a great commotion, and the roars of their mounts soared into the sky. Dozens of flying ships whizzed past overhead, and a large number of oracles hovered in the air, emanating a tremendous wave of energy that swept out in all directions. Such a great commotion immediately alarmed the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance in the valley. Dozens of immortals flew out of the valley and stood on top of a few rocky peaks that were about 10,000 feet tall, cupping their fists and greeting the army with smiles on their faces. King Yangqiu, are you here to fight the formation again? How many men are you going to lose this time? A white-bearded old Taoist, clad in an apricot-yellow Taoist robe, carrying a 7 stars dragon fang sword on his back, holding a horsetail whisk in his hand, and looking like a transcendent immortal, taunted King Yangqiu. His tone was full of sarcasm and complacency. King Yangqiu gave the Taoist a gloomy look, but he did not get angry. When I break the formation, I'll definitely kill you with 1,000 cuts, and I'll have the whole army treat your wife and daughter well, he said coolly. As King Yangqiu's voice rang out, Wu Qi rode to the edge of the valley and fixed his eyes on the valley ahead. Chapter 689. The immortals were looking at Wu Qi, but Wu Qi did not even spare them a glance. After glancing at the huge ravine, Wu Qi slowly closed his eyes. Then he performed an incantation gesture with both hands and placed them over his eyes, murmuring a strange incantation in a low voice. The sunny sky suddenly darkened, and a chilly wind fell straight down from the sky, filling the air with dust and sand. A small whirlwind, no more than a foot high, spun and rolled up countless blades of grass and dust. King Yangqiu looked appreciatively at the weapon, while the generals around him exchanged glances with each other, their faces pale with fright. He was indeed a freak who cultivated both magic and fleshly body. There were so many princes and dignitaries in Diyu, but only a few of the oldest princes had such figures around them, and all of them were top experts in Diyu. And now, King Yangqiu had found such a freak. Unknowingly, the generals and oracles around King Yangqiu straightened their backs. A man who cultivated both magic and fleshly body was of great value to King Yangqiu. Only King Yangqiu's confidants knew that even among the upper echelons of Diyu, there were some conflicts that were not known to outsiders. Just like King Yangqiu and his brothers, there were all kinds of disputes between them. At all costs, even if I have to exhaust all the resources at hand, I must make him improve his cultivation base as quickly as possible. King Yangqiu clenched his fists tightly and made up his mind. At the same time, he felt a little headache. The fact that Wu Qi cultivated both magic and fleshly body could not be kept a secret. He had to do his best to improve Wu Qi's cultivation base, but some others would probably have to do their best to cut off Wu Qi's head. A fierce gleam flashed across his eyes. King Yangqiu was indifferent to the provocation of those immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance, but this time he clenched one of his teeth and broke it. Blood sprayed out of his mouth as he slowly swallowed the broken teeth and murmured in a low voice, "You are wrong and I am right. I can't let you do whatever you want." A thick grayish-white aura poured into Wu Qi's body like dragons, and amidst a shrill ghost howl, he slowly opened his eyes. His eyes had turned grayish-white, and two small ghost heads had appeared where his pupils used to be. The ghost heads were shooting out a thin grayish-white beam of light, which was so thin and weak that it penetrated thousands of miles through the faint mist in the valley ahead. It was one of the many eye techniques of the Directorate of Celestials, the Eyes of Myriad Ghosts. It allowed the user to gather the power of myriad ghosts in their eyes, allowing them to see through all the veins in the earth and the circulation of natural energy. When cultivated to the highest level, they could even peer into the yellow springs. Legend had it that someone had cultivated the eyes of myriad ghosts to an unimaginable level, allowing them to see the ghosts struggling and roaring in the transmigration under the yellow springs. Wu Qi had not cultivated the eyes of 10,000 ghosts to a very profound level, and he had only been studying the various magic techniques of the Directorate of Celestials for about 2 years. How could he have the time to practice these mystic arts? But he had the chaotic divine eyes as his foundation, and with them as the foundation, he was able to exert the power of the eyes of 10,000 ghosts to a very powerful level in one fell swoop. Wherever the wisps of ghost light shone, the faint mist that the immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance had deliberately created in the valley could no longer block Wu Qi's eyes. In a flash, he had seen everything in the valley. The mountains and rivers map used by King Yangqiu was also an extraordinary treasure that could spy on the enemy's movements from hundreds of miles away. But its power was limited, and the mist that the immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance had created in the formation had interfered with the mountains and rivers map. Only when Wu Qi peeked into the formation with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts did he realize that the situation in the valley was very different from what he had seen in the map. Surrounding the small lake in the middle of the valley and the gorgeous immortal pavilions were 12 peaks that stood 100 miles high. These peaks had been concealed by someone with the technique of bubble and shadow. The 12 peaks, each about 100 miles high and about a mile in circumference, had been compressed into 12 beautiful artificial mountains that stood no more than 100 feet tall. Surrounding these 12 peaks was a ring of 108 peaks, each 64 miles high. These peaks corresponded to the positions of the celestial Dipper star and the earthly Fiend star, and by drawing the star power down from the sky, they had formed the true forms of 108 celestial lords. Various spirit beasts, such as flood dragons, Pishio, Qilin, serpents, bears, and wolves, were wheeling and roaring furiously. These true forms were condensed from starlight, and each of them contained a wisp of the divine power of the celestial lords. Once they were activated, their power was truly frightening. The celestial lords and the earthly Fiend star lords were the leaders of the celestial lords conferred by the celestial court, and each of them possessed very strong divine abilities and magic power. The formation of Heavenly Dipper and Earthly Fiend outside the Celestial Court was said to have the power to trap a top-grade primordial immortal. But now, it had drawn a wisp of the divine power of the Celestial Lords and the Earthly Fiend Star Lords, which meant that its power was not to be underestimated. Although it was impossible to trap a primordial immortal, it could easily trap hundreds of gold immortals. The 108 peaks had also been concealed by someone with a divine ability. They looked like a bunch of inconspicuous mounds of dirt piled up on the ground, and some ordinary thatched cottages had been built around them. The person who had constructed the formation was indeed a little abominable, as he was afraid that he would not be able to lure more people into the formation to die. Beyond these 2 rings of peaks were the 36,000 stone peaks that King Yangqiu had seen in the map, each of which was guarded by an itinerant cultivator whose cultivation base was at least at the nascent soul realm. These stone peaks corresponded to the stars, and each of them was guarded by an itinerant cultivator whose cultivation base was at least at the nascent soul realm. Everything was arranged according to the stars in the sky, including the 12 Yuanshan, the 28 mansions, the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. In the key parts of these star regions, the important peaks were all guarded by existences with the cultivation base of heaven immortals. In this formation alone, there were 1,080 heaven immortals guarding the foundation of the formation on the 36,000 peaks. What astonished Wu Qi even more was that this formation was actually a complete formation with a complete set of formation instruments. There was an altar on each of the stone peaks, 3 offerings on each of them, and a 36-feet-long flag flashing with a silver gleam, fluttering in the air. These flags were condensed from the star power, and they were flickering with the true shadow of the stars corresponding to the peaks, which had also attracted a wisp of the divine power of the corresponding stars. In addition to the arrangement on the peaks, there were also many weapons, such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hammers, and many other weapons flying in the air around each of the peaks. With just a glance at the weapons, Wu Qi knew that they were all made according to the pattern of the weapons carried by the celestial lords of the stars in the sky. For example, the heavenly evil star usually used the 7-star dragon abyss sword, and there was a 6-feet-long sword hovering next to the stone peaks in the heavenly evil star's position. Another example was the heavenly evil star usually used a pair of one-handed axes to chop off people's heads, and there were 2 8-feet-long bronze axes the size of a door hovering next to the stone peaks in the heavenly evil star's position, glowing with a strong blood-red light. 36,000 stone peaks meant that there were 36,000 tailor-made immortal weapons flying in the air. Even Wu Qi could not help but feel his scalp go numb at the sight. Heavens, how much effort did Myriad Immortal Alliance put in to lay out this formation? Although in Wu Qi's Dharma eyes of 10,000 ghosts, all 36,000 sets of immortal items were the most ordinary 36th grade immortal items, and their power was the weakest among all 36th grade immortal items. But when so many of them were drawn by the formation and attracted the power of the stars, even a gold immortal would not be able to defend against them. Not to mention that the arrangement on the peaks clearly showed that the formation could attract the projections of the celestial lords in the sky to come down to help. If the projections of those celestial lords really came down to help, they could increase the power of the formation by more than 100 times. It was still impossible to kill a top-grade primordial immortal, but a low-grade supreme oracle like Yugu would most likely be trapped in the formation and unable to escape. Sucking in a cold breath, Wu Qi turned his eyes to the pool in the middle of the valley. He had a feeling that there was something strange about it. After staring at the pool for a while, Wu Qi had just used the 1,000 ghost eyes to see through a layer of drifting silver starlight over the pool, and when he saw a strong energy of pure spirit emanating from the bottom of the pool, a column of intense flames suddenly rose from the formation. The flame was pale gold in color and looked like melted glass, quiet and without the slightest violent aura. But as soon as it appeared, the 2 ghost heads in Wu Qi's eyes exploded, and the grayish-white mist around him sprayed out in all directions while letting out shrill ghost howls. The small whirlwinds on the ground subsided abruptly as well, and the sun appeared out of nowhere in the sky, sprinkling its scorching rays down. A middle-aged Taoist clad in a pale gold Taoist robe and holding a round mirror about a foot in diameter flew up on a white cloud. When he was less than 10 miles away from Wu Qi, he let out a loud laugh and said, "My ignorance nearly allowed you to see through the formation, General." After laughing, the Taoist shook his head and said, "You're using the 1,000 ghost eyes, aren't you? To be able to see through my 10,000-mile grand array with a single glance, you must have spent at least 30 to 50 years of hard work on this 10,000 ghost Dharma eye. What a pity! My brilliant Sun True Flame Mirror is specialized in breaking all kinds of ghost Tao spells, so I'm afraid you won't be able to keep your 1,000 ghost eyes." Wu Qi shook his head and slowly took a few steps back. With a gloomy face, King Yang Qiu drove the chariot a few steps forward and cried out coldly, "Lord Wandering Immortal, you are one of the top figures in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Don't you feel ashamed to launch a sneak attack?" This middle-aged Taoist was the Lord of Wandering Immortal Alliance? Wu Qi retracted the 1,000 ghost eyes and looked at him curiously. 30 to 50 years of hard work. It had only been a few days since Wu Qi began to cultivate the 1,000 ghost eyes, and his foundation was actually the chaotic divine eyes. So, he was not afraid of the brilliant sun true flame mirror. The wandering immortal hall chief burst into laughter again. He heaved a long sigh and said, "Shame? What's there to be ashamed of? I've only laid out a small formation, yet I've stopped the mighty King Yang Qiu from advancing, and instead, I've suffered heavy casualties. What's there to be ashamed of? On the contrary, King Yang Qiu, with his army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, can't do anything to me. That's a disgrace to King Yang Qiu, isn't it?" After laughing 3 times, Lord Wandering Immortal cried out, "King Yang Qiu, you've lost tens of thousands of soldiers in this formation last time, and only a few of your generals managed to escape. Now, let me ask you, do you dare to enter my formation again?" King Yang Qiu did not answer. Instead, he turned to look at Wu Qi. Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then made a gesture of retreat. King Yang Qiu nodded, raised his right fist, and waved it backward. The tens of thousands of soldiers immediately retreated without saying a word to Lord Wandering Immortal. All the immortals and cultivators in the formation were struck dumb. This was not like King Yang Qiu's character. Chapter 690. Even without Wu Qi's explanation, they all knew what the alliance was up to. When King Yang Qiu sent an army to attack the formation for the first time, Myriad Immortal Alliance had slaughtered tens of thousands of soldiers, leaving only some seriously wounded generals and ordinary soldiers to flee back to the formation, just to lure King Yang Qiu into sending more soldiers and generals to their deaths. Taking a deep breath, King Yang Qiu pointed at Wu Qi and cried out, "Tan Lang, tell me, can you break this formation?" The oracles stole glances at their companions, and then turned to look at Wu Qi at the same time. They knew, and they also knew that King Yang Qiu knew very well that all the oracles present had been practicing mystic arts for hundreds of years, but it had only been 2 years since Wu Qi started practicing mystic arts, and yet his eyes of 10,000 ghosts had already surpassed all of them. Either all the oracles present were idiots, or Wu Qi was a genius. Looking up at King Yang Qiu, Wu Qi pointed at the layout of the 36,000 peaks in the periphery. As he pointed at the peaks one by one, the flags condensed of star power, the heaven immortals and cultivators who guarded the peaks, and the immortal artifacts hovering around them were all exposed to King Yang Qiu and the others. Wu Qi looked curiously in the direction of the Great Hall's gate. What was Lu Bang doing here? From a distance, Lu Bang's hearty and somewhat slippery laughter rang out. "King Yang Qiu, I've come to see you today. Don't shut the door on me. I'm an old friend of King Yang Shan, so you can't just shut the door on me, can you?" As soon as Yu Qingqing's voice rang out, a long shout came from the entrance of the cloud platform. The oracles were all sighing with emotion. With this freak serving King Yang Qiu, it was likely that they would not be put in an important position. On the other hand, King Yang Qiu, who had kept silent with a straight face, was cheering and roaring in his heart, "Wonderful! I'm so lucky to have such a talent. I must improve Tan Lang's cultivation base as quickly as possible. Wonderful." Wu Qi shook his head and chuckled. He did not bother to explain further and walked to the side of the catalogue. The other generals sat on the black chairs on both sides according to their positions, looking at Wu Qi with bright eyes. A priest in a black robe casually tossed a thin jade slip towards Wu Qi. He hurriedly grabbed the jade slip and scanned it with his divine sense. It was the method to control the catalogue in front of him. Then, it was the peak slightly outside, where the true life forms of the 108 celestial spirits and earthly fiends had been condensed. Wu Qi said frankly, "Not to mention the others, just these true life forms of the 108 celestial spirits and earthly fiends alone. Legend has it that the celestial spirits and earthly fiends conferred by the celestial court are all great demons. Their true forms and divine abilities are all in line with the heavenly Tao. With the conferment of the celestial court, Although they only had the cultivation base of gold immortals, they could fight against primordial immortals with the help of the power of the stars. Although this is only the true life form of one celestial spirit and a wisp of divine power, when 108 celestial spirits joined forces, King Yangqiu sucked in a cold breath. He rose to his feet in horror and bellowed, 36,000 sets of immortal items. What are these bastards trying to do? Strange. If they are so powerful, why did they? The dozens of powerful oracles in the Great Hall all bowed their heads and dared not to say a word. They had felt very strange when Wu Qi used the eyes of 10,000 ghosts just now. The ghost aura emanating from Wu Qi was not very strong, but it was very surprising that he could see through the formation with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts. After all, the valley was obscured by the smoke and clouds generated by the formation. Even the few strongest sun oracles around King Yangqiu could only see about 1,000 miles into the formation with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts. They could not see what the core of the formation looked like, let alone discover the existence of the 12 mountains. With that, Wu Qi pulled King Yangqiu and disappeared without a trace. Staring blankly at the dust stirred up by the army, Lord Wandering Immortal, who was pretending to try to entice King Yangqiu to send another army to attack the formation, stamped his feet angrily. 12 beams of light shot out of his eyes, and in the middle of the picture, Wu Qi marked out the positions of the 12 mountains he had seen with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts. Driven by his mind, the catalogue automatically condensed into mountains according to the images he saw with a faint light. King Yangqiu jumped to his feet as soon as he saw the mountains with the wrong positions. Didn't any of you know how to use the eyes of 10,000 ghosts before Tanlang? He bellowed. As the army returned to the barracks, Wu Qi, King Yangqiu, and the others went back to the Great Hall. Wu Qi and the hundreds of captains were all clad in heavy armors, and their boots were made of the same metal. Therefore, when they walked, their footsteps produced rumbling noises that sounded like muffled thunderclaps. It was a very frightening sight. In the Great Hall, a few of Yu Qingqing's disciples were pointing at the map and calculating the details of the formation. When they saw Wu Qi and the others return, they hurriedly retreated. How could a man like Yu Gu compare with King Yangqiu's trusted aides in terms of loyalty and pragmatism? Without Wu Qi, according to King Yangqiu's temperament, he was likely to mobilize the superior army that he thought could easily destroy the formation to avenge his beloved general. But, according to the layout of the formation, unless King Yangqiu mobilized more than 10 supreme oracles, there was no way they could break it, and everyone would be trapped in it. Gritting his teeth, Lord Wandering Immortal sneered and said, "You're lucky today. King Yangqiu, how much longer can you be so arrogant? The Alliance leader's plan is about to enter the second phase. Hee, you must have had a good time killing us these days, haven't you?" After muttering to himself for a while, he shook his head and sighed, then led the dozens of immortals behind him back to the pavilion in the valley. There was still a long way to go before Myriad Immortal Alliance's final plan could be completed. I'll make a decision when the situation is about to become clear. Should I stay in the Tao League or join the Buddhist League? We'll see when the time comes. Glaring fiercely at the oracles around him who bowed their heads in silence, King Yangqiu cried out in a deep voice, "I can forgive you this time. The Directorate of Celestials has all kinds of mystic arts, and it's understandable that you don't specialize in the eyes of 10,000 ghosts." Taking a deep breath, King Yangqiu sat back on his throne, then waved his hand to signal Wu Qi to continue analyzing the formation. Wu Qi was lost in thought as he studied the three-layered formation. At last, he pointed his finger at the pool in the middle of the valley. "There's something strange in the pool," he said in a deep voice. "There's something very powerful in it. If I can figure out what's in it, I should be able to break the formation." A black jade throne rose silently in the Great Hall, followed by a few rows of large chairs of different heights on either side of the map. Sitting on these very high chairs, one could overlook the whole map from above. With the incredible eyesight brought by the strong fleshly bodies of these Diyu generals, although the map was only a few miles long and wide, they could not miss any detail. King Yangqiu took off his armor and robe and put on the outfit that Wu Qi had seen just now. Sitting crookedly on the jade throne, he pointed at the map and cried out, Tan Lang, what have you found? Tell me now. My subjects, please take a closer look. Perhaps, the key to breaking the formation in the future will be with this guy. It's not that it can't be, it must be with him. With a cracking sound, King Yang Qiu and the hundreds of generals under him crushed the armrests of their chairs to pieces. Judging by their neat movements, it was clear that this was not the first time they had done this. At the same time, a few oracles raised their hands and waved them at the same time. A bright light swept across the room, turning the broken armrests into powder and floating in the air before quickly reforming into armrests again. Looking at Wu Qi, King Yang Qiu's heart was pounding violently. I must cultivate him into a supreme oracle as soon as possible. Of course, before that, he had to give Wu Qi more high positions and generous salaries, as well as countless rich and beautiful women, so that he could win his heart. King Yang Qiu raised his eyebrows. Just as he was about to speak, Yu Qingxing's voice came from outside the Great Hall. Your Excellency, don't be deceived by this guy. How could a mere myriad immortal alliance form the true form of a celestial lord in the formation? Does he think the alliance has the support of the celestial court? King Yang Qiu's face twitched. After pondering for a moment, he slowly clapped his hands and said, "Open the main gate and welcome the envoy of the celestial court." King Yang Qiu, who was still in shock a moment ago, slowly sat back on his jade throne and cried out in a deep voice, "Hee, what a good plan. These immortals are indeed insidious and treacherous, and they are no longer the same as us, the chosen ones. What a group of people!" Wu Qi could not help but marvel in his mind. The fact that King Yang Qiu and his generals were able to perform the exact same action showed that they had almost reached the level of telepathic fiend energy. And the fact that those oracles were able to cast spells to restore the armrests of their chairs so neatly showed that they had done this many times, and they were very experienced in it. Wu Qi marked out the peaks corresponding to the 12 yuanshan, then explained the possible impact the existence of these 12 peaks would have on the entire formation. When King Yang Qiu and the generals heard that the power of the formation could even threaten primordial immortals with the addition of the 12 peaks, their faces turned extremely unsightly in an instant. Did this have anything to do with the formation of the myriad immortal alliance? So, Wu Qi was a genius, a rare genius who cultivated both fleshly body and magic. Cupping his fist at the oracle, Wu Qi memorized the hundreds of hand seals in the jade slip, then performed an incantation gesture with both hands and pointed at the center of the formation. Shoving the brilliant sun true flame mirror into his sleeve, Lord Wandering Immortal looked up at the sky and sighed. Should I continue to be an immortal, or should I go to the 8 treasures lotus throne like them? Tao League is good? Buddhism League is good? Tao League is free and unfettered, but Buddhism League is powerful, and we can get a lot of benefits. But among the oracles present, there were several powerful sun oracles. How could they be idiots? Special Envoy of the Celestial Court, Liu Bang, King of Han, requests an audience with Your Excellency. But 10 supreme oracles working together. Do you think King Yang Qiu is the current human emperor? It was not easy for King Yang Qiu to recruit Yugu, and it was only because all his descendants had been subdued by King Yang Qiu that he was willing to serve King Yang Qiu to a limited extent. The faces of the generals and oracles in the Great Hall flickered, and they turned to look at Wu Qi at the same time. Chapter 691. When he opened the front door of the Great Hall, all the doors were wide open, and the longbow people lined up on both sides. Hundreds of powerful longbow people, together with 3,000 elite soldiers in bright armor, were standing in a line to welcome Liu Bang. Coupled with the sonorous trumpets and the dull beating of war drums, King Yang Qiu had arranged a grand array to welcome Liu Bang. When he recalled how King Yang Qiu had tried to kill Liu Bang the last time they met, Wu Qi felt that the scene before him was like a dream. Not only did Wu Qi find the scene a little absurd and unbelievable, even Liu Bang himself was a little stunned. Sitting in the chariot, surrounded by a large group of beautiful female immortals and guarded by a large group of heavenly soldiers, Liu Bang looked cautiously at King Yang Qiu, who had come out to greet him, and even put on a posture of running away at any time. Wu Qi even saw a faint white cloud swirling under Liu Bang's feet, and he had even prepared an escape art. King Yongqiu led Wu Qi and a large group of military officers and oracles out of the cloud platform. As he strode along, he said in a low voice, "Don't underestimate this man. He's not a good guy, but those who dare to underestimate him have all been killed by him. The men my father trained once fought him head-on. Even though my father is a hero, he failed to defeat him. You must be careful of him." As they walked, King Yongqiu introduced the few generals around Liu Bang to Wu Qi and others. Zhang Liang, Han Xen, Xiao He and Fan Kuai, who stood next to Liu Bang like an iron block, were all looking at them with bright gleams in their eyes. Blue veins were bulging on the back of Fan Kuai's hands, and it was clear that he was ready to strike at any time. The last time King Yongqiu and Liu Bang met, King Yongqiu had attacked and wounded Zhang Liang and others. Later on, it was Liu Bang who had used his trump card to force King Yongqiu back. The tragic scene was still fresh in their minds. If King Yongqiu suddenly attacked, and Liu Bang did not have time to react, he might really be killed by him. Therefore, they had to be careful. But today, King Yongqiu was extremely gentle. With a faint smile on his face, he came to the front of Liu Bang's chariot, cupped his fist, and bowed to Liu Bang. "Please forgive me for not going out to greet you, celestial emissary. King of Han is an honorable guest that no one can invite. Please come into the hall as soon as possible. I've prepared a fine banquet to welcome King of Han." With a strange laugh, King Yongqiu narrowed his slender eyes and glanced at the people around Liu Bang. "Well, I've heard that King of Han likes beautiful women," he said coolly. "So, I've prepared a lot of stunning beauties for King of Han. I'm sure you'll be satisfied with them." Liu Bang narrowed his eyes and smiled as well. With his belly propped up, he slowly rose to his feet, stepped out of the chariot, and bowed to King Yongqiu. Grinning from ear to ear, Liu Bang shook hands with King Yongqiu and looked him in the eyes. Then he nodded and said, "It's great to have beautiful women. Come on, I've come to the right place with fine wine and beautiful women." Liu Bang did not mention that he was an old friend of King Yongqiu's father, and King Yongqiu also chose to forget those words. Holding hands, they looked at each other and smiled like a pair of affectionate childhood sweethearts. Their smiles were so pure that they could only be described as perfect, with no flaws to be found. In Wu Qi's eyes, the two men looked at each other and giggled for a while, then walked hand in hand toward the Great Hall. A large group of military officers and oracles hurriedly followed behind King Yongqiu, while Fan Kuai and others followed closely behind Liu Bang. One of King Yongqiu's subordinates, who was about 10 feet tall and about the same size as Fan Kuai, saw Fan Kuai following closely behind Liu Bang, and without saying a word, he bumped his shoulder toward Fan Kuai. It was only a short distance of 2 to 3 feet, but when the general collided with Fan Kuai, a strange whistling noise rang out, and his elbow was aimed at Fan Kuai's ribs, looking like he was going to break Fan Kuai's ribs. A fierce gleam flickered in Han Xian's eyes as he turned to look at the general. Fan Kuai, on the other hand, laughed joyfully. Like a bear in heat, he leaped to the side and thrust his elbow toward the general's elbow as well. With a loud bang, the two elbows collided with each other. The heavy armors worn by both men were defensive treasures of excellent quality. Fan Kuai's was an upper-grade heaven immortal artifact crafted by the master craftsman of the celestial court, while the armor worn by the general was of the highest quality crafted by the master craftsman of Dayu's Directorate of Celestials. Both sets of armor contained extremely powerful strength. When the two sets of armor collided with each other, the result was mutual destruction. Large cracks spread out from the tips of the two elbows like spider webs, and the armor fragments fell to the ground with tinkling sounds. The two generals, who looked like wild beasts, exchanged a glance and slowly took a step to the side. Wu Qi could clearly see that their elbows had not been lowered for a long time. Presumably, the collision had damaged their bones and meridians. Their armors glowed faintly, and some of them began to ripple like flowing water, repairing the cracks on their elbows. Wu Qi happened to be walking next to Han Xen, and he heard Han Xen murmur in a low voice, What's the point of being so brave? Subconsciously, Wu Qi gave Han Xian a look. After all, he had fought him before. But Han Xian gave Wu Qi a rude glare. His eyes were as sharp as knives, full of warning and deterrence, as if Wu Qi dared to look at him one more time, Han Xian would attack him without hesitation. Wu Qi smiled faintly. This was a troublesome man with thorns all over his body. Sooner or later, Wu Qi would have to pluck all the thorns out of him. Han Xian's fierce glare had infuriated Wu Qi. He began to think of asking Lu Chengfeng to send a capable intelligence agent to search for Xiangyu. He must let Xiangyu know that Liu Bang had come to Pangu continent, and that Han Xian was right next to Liu Bang. He wondered what kind of wonderful sparks would be produced when these old foes met. With all kinds of bad thoughts rumbling in his mind, Wu Qi and his company had returned to the Great Hall of the army. The maps of mountains and rivers in the Great Hall had disappeared, replaced by banquets and tables carved out of black jade. All kinds of delicacies were piled up in the hall. In the middle of the Great Hall, there was an open space about a mile in circumference. Hundreds of beautiful female immortals and cultivators stood there, trembling with fear. Some of the female cultivators' faces were twitching, and tears were streaming down their faces from time to time. As soon as Liu Bang entered the Great Hall, his eyes lit up when he saw these beautiful female immortals and cultivators. Sure enough, they are all stunning beauties. I wonder, he said happily. King Yongqiu waved his hand generously and said in a flat voice, "These girls are all captives I've captured when I annihilated the rebels, and they have not been touched by anyone. They are all pure virgins. If King of Han likes them, you can take them away with you. But they have to entertain us first, and only leave with you after I've enjoyed myself to the fullest." Liu Bang nodded hurriedly, his eyes narrowing into slits as he smiled. Of course, that's how it should be. If that's the case, I won't stand on ceremony. These beauties are of the finest quality, and only a man like me who cherishes flowers can take good care of them. Wu Qi gave Liu Bang a look and thought to himself, this guy sure knows how to boast shamelessly. The banquet was ready, and everyone was seated according to the order of the host and the guest. The aroma of fine wine and delicacies wafted through the air. Musicians were playing music in the corners of the Great Hall, while hundreds of female immortals and cultivators danced stiffly in the hall. Although their faces were unsightly and their movements were stiff like wooden dolls, the occasional glimpse of their pink and tender bodies still aroused the cheers of the crowd. Suddenly, the thin veil on a female cultivator, who looked to be in her teens and whose cultivation base was only at the Jindan realm, fell off. Naked, she shrieked and squatted on the ground in horror, not daring to move. Sitting on the throne, King Yongqiu's eyes turned cold as he snorted softly. One of the black-robed oracles standing next to him flicked his finger, causing the female cultivator's body to stiffen and her head to explode, spilling blood all over the floor. King Yongqiu picked up his wine vessel and smiled at Liu Bang, whose face was a little stiff. These bitches really don't know how to have fun. They have submitted to the immortal Tao, and they are no longer the people of Diyu. Now, they are being asked to dance for entertainment instead of being asked to greet this king's soldiers. This is already their good fortune. How dare they disturb my honored guest's pleasure? Don't they deserve to die? Liu Bang turned to look at King Yongqiu, nodded slowly, and said, "Sure enough, this little bitch deserves to die. All she did was expose her body a little. No one raped her on the spot, so why did she make such a fuss? What a disappointment, a disappointment. How pitiful! How pitiful! Such a delicate body has to die before it can be enjoyed by anyone." He heaved a long sigh and suddenly burst into tears. In front of so many people, Liu Bang suddenly burst into tears and snot rolling down his cheeks. Before long, he was rolling on the ground, wailing and waving his arms and legs as if he had gone mad. Holding his wine vessel, King Yongqiu stared blankly at Liu Bang, his eyes wide. He had no idea what was wrong with Liu Bang. In the Great Hall, all the generals of Diyu stared blankly at Liu Bang with a mocking smile on their faces. On the other hand, Zhang Liang and the other attendants brought by Lu Bang had their heads bowed and remained motionless like wooden statues. On the other hand, the dancing female cultivators and immortals stopped dancing in panic and gathered together, not daring to make the slightest movement. Their lives were in King Yangqiu's hands, and if they made the slightest movement that they should not have, they would soon be turned into horrible corpses, just like the girl just now. Fiddling with the wine vessel, King Yangqiu watched Lu Bang writhe and wail. After a full 10 minutes, he asked slowly, "Why are you so sad, King of Han? What is it that makes you unhappy? Why don't you tell me so that I and my men can be happy?" Wu Qi nearly spat out the wine in his mouth. King Yangqiu's words were too insidious. But then he saw Lu Bang roll to his feet and sit on the ground. With tears in his eyes, he looked at King Yangqiu and wailed, "What's there to be unhappy about? I'm just sad about the hardship of the people's livelihood and the innocent people who have died tragically in the past few years." Disregarding his dignity, Lu Bang rolled to King Yangqiu's side, put his arms around his thigh, and cried, "The Celestial Court has decreed that the people of the Celestial Court must not interfere in the dispute between Myriad Immortal Alliance and you. But I've always been soft-hearted, and I can't bear to see the people being plunged into misery and suffering. I'm asking your highness in my own capacity, not as the celestial angel of the Celestial Court." With tears rolling down his cheeks, Lu Bang said in a hoarse voice, "Do you please withdraw your army? We can't fight anymore." Wu Qi's head was dizzy, and he nearly fell into the soup bowl in front of him. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.